I opened the garage door and my heart stopped. My wife's 1960 Impala, the only thing I had left of her, was gone. My son Dante laughed, flipping plane tickets in his hand. "Relax, Dad, I sold that old junk. Shelby deserves Paris." I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just waited for the phone to ring. Because Dante didn't know that car wasn't just steel and chrome. Hidden in the door panel was a secret worth $50 million. And the dealer just called me. "Mr. Moore, you need to see this. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach your own family a lesson they would never forget. The rain in Seattle does not wash things clean, it just makes the dirt heavier." I stood at the grave of my wife Bernice, feeling the water soak through my black wool coat. It had been exactly 1 year since I lowered her into the ground. 1 year of silence in a house that used to be filled with music. 1 year of sleeping on the left side of the bed, reaching out for a hand that wasn't there. I placed a single white rose on the headstone. The stone was cold. Everything was cold. I drove home in my Ford pickup, the wipers slapping a rhythm that sounded like a slow heartbeat. I wasn't looking forward to going back. The house was big, too big for one old man, but I kept it because Bernice loved the garden. I pulled into the driveway. The lights were on in the kitchen. I could see shadows moving. Dante and Shelby were there. They had moved in 6 months ago, supposedly to help me through my grief, but mostly because Dante had quit his job again, and Shelby needed a new backdrop for her social media videos. I pressed the button for the garage door. The motor whirred and the heavy door began to lift. I prepared myself for the sight that usually gave me a small measure of peace. The jade green curve of the fender, the chrome bumper that shone like a mirror, the 1960 Chevrolet Impala. It was Bernice's car. We had bought it from a scrapyard 30 years ago when we were young and hungry. We spent weekends restoring it. I did the engine, she did the interior. I remembered her small hands maneuvering the needle and thread, stitching the white leather seats with a precision that would make a surgeon jealous. She loved that car. She said it was the only place where the world couldn't touch us. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was a time capsule of our marriage. The door rolled all the way up, and the garage was empty. I stared at the concrete floor. There was nothing there but a small oil stain and the smell of old gasoline. The space where the Impala sat was a void, a black hole that sucked the air out of my lungs. I blinked, thinking maybe my old eyes were failing me. Maybe the grief had finally cracked my mind. But the emptiness was real. The car was gone. I turned off the truck and walked into the house. I didn't take off my wet coat. I didn't wipe my boots. I walked straight into the kitchen. The air inside was warm and smelled of expensive vanilla candles. Dante was leaning against the granite island, holding a glass of champagne. He was 32, but he still had the soft face of a boy who had never been punched. He was wearing a silk shirt unbuttoned to show off a gold chain I had bought him. Shelby was sitting on the counter swinging her legs. She was looking at her phone, scrolling through photos. She didn't even look up when I entered. "Where is the car?" I asked. My voice was low, a rumble that usually made sound engineers nervous. Dante looked up. He smiled a loose, wet smile. He was already tipsy. "Hey, Dad, you are back early. How was the cemetery?" "Depressing, I bet." "Where is the Impala, Dante?" He took a sip of his drink. "Oh, that. Don't worry about it, Dad. I handled it." "Handled it?" "Yeah. I sold it." The world tilted on its axis. He sold it. He sold Bernice's car, the car she had been buried with in spirit. "You did what I whispered." "I sold it," Dante said louder this time, as if he were explaining simple math to a child. "Look, Dad, that thing was just taking up space. It was a dust magnet. You never drive it. It was just sitting there rotting." "It wasn't rotting," I said. "It was perfect. It was old." "Dad," Shelby chimed in, finally looking up from her screen. Her eyes were cold blue ice. "It smelled like mildew and old perfume. It was creepy. Besides, we needed the space. I want to set up a home gym in the garage." "You sold my wife's car," I said, stepping closer. Dante pushed himself off the counter. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. He tossed it onto the table. "Relax, Dad. I got a good deal. Some guy came by, he buys junkers. He gave me $15,000 cash, 15 grand, Dad, for a pile of scrap metal. $15,000. The engine alone was worth 20. The custom leather interior Bernice had sewn with her own hands was priceless. A fully restored 1960 Impala in that condition could fetch 6 figures at auction, but he had sold it to a curbstoner for $15,000. And look what we got, Dante said, beaming. He picked up 2 pieces of paper from the counter and waved them in the air. First-class tickets to Paris. We leave tomorrow. Shelby has always wanted to go for Fashion Week. We are going to stay at the Ritz. We are going to live a little. I looked at the tickets. I looked at the champagne. I looked at my son. He had traded 30 years of his mother's labor for a week of croissants and selfies. You stole from me, I said. Dante rolled his eyes. I didn't steal it, Dad. I liquidated an asset. You are always talking about assets. Well, now we have memories instead of a dusty car. You should be thanking me. I decluttered your life. Thanking you. Yes, Shelby said, hopping off the counter. Honestly, Thad, you are so dramatic. It is just a car. Bernice is gone. She doesn't need it anymore. You need to move on. Stop living in a museum. We are young. We need to enjoy life. She walked past me, the scent of her perfume clashing with the smell of rain on my wool coat. She patted my arm patronizingly. Maybe you can use the garage for something useful now, she said, like storage for your old records. Or better yet, just leave it empty so Dante can park the Porsche he wants to buy. She laughed. Dante laughed with her. I stood there in the kitchen of the house I paid for, listening to the people I supported mock the memory of the woman who made me who I was. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab Dante by his silk collar and shake him until his teeth rattled. I wanted to tell him that he wasn't a businessman, he was a parasite. I wanted to tell him that the old records he despised were the masters of the greatest soul albums of the 70s, albums I produced, albums that built this house. But I didn't, because shouting wouldn't bring the car back, and shouting wouldn't teach them a lesson. I looked at Dante. I looked at his soft hands. I looked at the way he avoided my eyes when the silence stretched too long. He was weak. He was greedy. And he was stupid. You sold it for $15,000, I asked, my voice steady. Yeah, Dante said. Cash. The guy took it an hour ago. Said he was shipping it out of state tonight. Who was the buyer? I don't know, some guy named Sal or Cal. He had a tow truck. It doesn't matter, Dad. It is done. Sal. My heart skipped a beat. Sal Russo. If it was Sal, there was a chance. Sal wasn't just a guy with a tow truck. He was the biggest classic car dealer on the West Coast, and he was an old friend. I looked at the envelope of cash on the table. Keep it, I said. Dante's eyes lit up. Really? Thanks, Dad. You are the best. I am sure you will need it in Paris, I said. I turned around. Where are you going? Shelby asked. We were going to order sushi. To celebrate. I am going to work, I said. I walked out of the kitchen. I walked down the hall to my study. I heard them laughing behind me. He is so weird, Shelby said. Who works at 7 p.m. on a Friday? Let him go, Dante said. He is just grumpy because he knows I made a great deal. I entered my study. I closed the heavy oak door. I turned the lock. The silence of the room wrapped around me. The walls were lined with gold records, but I kept them covered with curtains. To Dante, this was just a boring office where his dad did consulting. He didn't know I was TK Legend. He didn't know I still owned the publishing rights to half the songs on the radio. I sat down at my desk. I put my head in my hands. For a moment, I let the grief wash over me. I missed Bernice. I missed her wisdom. She would know what to do with this boy. She would know how to love him even when he was unlovable. But she wasn't here, and the car was gone. And then the phone rang. It wasn't the house line. It was my private cell, the one only 5 people in the world had. I looked at the screen. Sal Russo. I picked it up. Sal, I said. Thad. Sal's voice was breathless, urgent. I tried to call you an hour ago. A kid came into my shop. A flipper. He brought me a '60 Impala. Green. Mint condition. He wanted 20 grand for it. That was my son, Sal, I said, closing my eyes. I figured, Sal said. I bought it, Thad. I gave him the 20 just to get him out of here. I knew it was yours the second I saw the stitching on the seats. Nobody stitches like Bernice. Thank you, Sal, I said, exhaling a breath I didn't know I was holding. I will wire you the money. Double it. Just keep it safe. That is not why I am calling. Thad, Sal said. His voice dropped. It became serious. I took the door panels off to check for rust. You know, standard procedure before I detail it. And I found something, Sal said. Thad, you need to come down here. Now. What did you find, Sal? A package, Sal said. It was wrapped in plastic taped to the inside of the driver's side door. It has your name on it, and Bernice's handwriting. My hand tightened on the phone. Bernice, Thad Sal whispered. I opened it. I had to check. It is the masters, Thad. The lost tapes and the contracts. I froze. The lost masters. The original analog recordings of the Midnight Sessions, the album I produced in 1979 that never got released because of a legal dispute with the label, the album that everyone said was a myth, the contracts proving I owned them 100%. Those tapes were worth $50 million conservatively. I thought they were lost in a studio fire in '82. I thought they were ash. Bernice had them. She hid them. She put them in the one place she knew I would never sell. She put them in the car. She was saving them for our retirement or for a rainy day. And my son had just sold them for a plane ticket to Paris. I am coming, Sal, I said. Lock the doors. Don't let anyone in. I am armed, Thad Sal said. Nobody touches this car but you. I hung up the phone. I stood up. I walked to the window. I could see Dante and Shelby in the backyard taking selfies by the pool. They were drinking my champagne. They were laughing. They were planning their trip to Paris. They thought they had won. They thought they had pulled a fast one on the old man. They had no idea. They had just sold a $50 million lottery ticket for pocket change. And tomorrow, when they got on that plane, I was going to make sure they found out exactly what it cost to underestimate Thad Moore. I unlocked the door. I walked out of the study. I walked past the kitchen. Have fun in Paris, I said to the empty hallway, because when you come back the locks will be changed and the music will be over. The windshield wipers of my Ford pickup struggled against the relentless Seattle downpour as I drove toward the industrial district. The city was a blur of gray and neon, a reflection of the storm raging inside my chest. It was 9 o'clock at night. Most men my age were sitting in their recliners watching the news or sleeping. I was driving into the dark to salvage the last piece of my heart that my son hadn't yet destroyed. I pulled into the lot of Russo's Classic Auto. It was a fortress of corrugated steel and barbed wire, a place where beautiful machines went to be reborn or to die. Sal Russo was waiting for me by the bay door. He was a short, thick man with oil permanently etched into his fingerprints and a loyalty that couldn't be bought. He opened the gate remotely and I drove in, parking my truck next to a rusted-out Mustang. I got out of the truck, ignoring the rain soaking my flannel shirt. Sal met me with a grim expression. He didn't offer a handshake. He knew this wasn't a social call. It is inside, Thad Sal said, his voice rough like gravel. I put it on the lift in the back, away from the windows. I followed him into the garage. The smell of grease and paint thinner hit me, a smell that usually brought me comfort, but tonight it smelled like betrayal. We walked past rows of half-finished projects until we reached the private bay in the back. There she was, the 1960 Impala, jade green, chrome shining under the fluorescent lights. It looked exactly as it had when Bernice and I finished it 10 years ago. It didn't look like a car that had been sold for scrap. It looked like a queen sitting on a throne. I ran my hand over the fender. The metal was cold. Who did he sell it to, Sal? I asked, my eyes not leaving the car. A flipper from Tacoma, Sal said, spitting on the concrete. A kid named Rick. He buys estates in desperate sales. Your boy called him. Told him he had a junker he needed gone in an hour. Rick gave him $15,000 cash. He thought he was robbing the kid blind. He brought it here to see if I wanted to buy it for $30,000. He didn't know who owned it. He sold my wife's 30 years of work for $15,000 to a stranger. The number echoed in my head. It was less than the cost of the paint job. I bought it back, Sal continued. I gave Rick $40,000, told him to get lost and forget he ever saw the car. He took the money and ran. He thinks he won the lottery. You overpaid, I said quietly. I paid for silence, Thad Sal said. But that is not why I called you. You need to see the door. Sal walked to the driver's side door. He had already popped the interior panel. It was hanging loose, revealing the hollow steel skeleton of the car's frame. I was checking for rust, Sal explained. You know standard intake, and I saw this. He reached into the door cavity and pulled out a package. It wasn't small. It was a thick, heavy bundle wrapped in layers of waterproof plastic and duct tape. It was wedged deep in the mechanism, designed to stay hidden forever unless you were looking for it. I took the package. My hands trembled. I recognized the tape. I recognized the way it was wrapped. Bernice did everything with precision. I walked over to Sal's workbench. I grabbed a utility knife and carefully sliced through the tape. I peeled back the plastic layers. The smell of old paper and magnetic tape wafted out. Inside was a stack of legal documents yellowed with age and a small hard case containing a reel-to-reel tape and a modern USB drive. I opened the file first. The top document was a copyright registration, dated 1978. Artist T.K. Legend, album The Midnight Sessions, owner of Master Recordings Thaddeus Moore. I felt the air leave the room. T.K. Legend. That was the name. That was the ghost I had buried 40 years ago. Back in the 70s, I was a producer. I worked in the shadows, fixing beats, writing hooks, making other people sound like stars. I wrote hits for the biggest names in soul and jazz, but the industry was ugly. It chewed people up. So I created a pseudonym, T.K. Legend. I wrote a catalog of songs that became the backbone of the genre. Samples, covers, remixes. Those songs were played at weddings, at funerals, in elevators, and in movies. But I never claimed the fame. I walked away in '82 when the drugs and the sharks got too close to my family. I wanted a quiet life for Bernice and Dante. So I hid. I let the checks go to a holding company. I let the world think T.K. Legend was a myth or a dead man. I thought the original masters were lost. I thought the proof of ownership was buried in a landfill in New Jersey. I looked at the tape. The Midnight Sessions. This was the Holy Grail. This was the unreleased album. The one every collector in the world whispered about. Bernice had them. There was a note clipped to the file. It was written on her stationery. For Thad. I know you wanted to forget, but the world needs the music. And we might need the safety. I saved these for a rainy day. If you are reading this, it is pouring. Don't let them take your voice. Love, B. I stared at the note. Tears blurred my vision. She knew. She always knew. She knew I would need this. She knew Dante would break my heart one day, and she left me a parachute. Sal looked at the papers over my shoulder. He whistled low and long. Thad, he whispered, is this real? Are you TK? Legend. I nodded slowly. I am. Sal looked at me with wide eyes. He looked at the old man in the flannel shirt, and then he looked at the documents that represented a fortune. Do you know what this is worth, Thad? The publishing rights alone, with the streaming boom, with the samples. 50 million, I said, conservatively. Maybe more if I auction the masters. $50 million, hidden in the door of a Chevy Impala. And Dante sold it for 15 grand. He sold his inheritance. He sold his mother's love. He sold a fortune because he wanted to go to Paris and eat cheese. The irony was so heavy, it almost crushed me. He called me a failure. He called me cheap. He thought I was a retired mechanic living on a pension. He didn't know his father was a musical architect. He didn't know the car he despised was the most valuable thing he would ever touch. I put the documents back in the plastic. I put the tape in my pocket. Sal, I said, I need to pay you. You don't owe me anything, Thad. I owe you everything I said. You saved my life tonight. I am going to write you a check for $80,000. That covers the buyback and your trouble. And Sal. Yeah. This never happened. The car was just an old car. You bought it back because you knew I was sentimental. You never saw the package. Sal nodded. He understood. He was a vault. I never saw a thing, just a rusty door panel. I wrote the check. It was drawn from a private account that Dante didn't know existed. The account where the royalties had been quietly accumulating for 40 years. I walked back to the Impala. I opened the driver's door and sat in the seat. It smelled like Bernice. It smelled like vanilla and leather. I put my hands on the steering wheel. I am taking it to the storage unit I told Sal, the climate-controlled one in Bellevue, the one under the name Smith. I will follow you, Sal said, just to be safe. We drove out of the garage. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black. I drove the Impala, carefully treating it like the treasure it was. I felt the power of the engine, the smooth ride. It was a masterpiece. We arrived at the storage facility an hour later. It was a nondescript concrete building with high security. I punched in my code. The gate opened. I drove the car into my private unit. It was filled with other ghosts. A 1955 Porsche Spyder, a vintage mixing board, boxes of gold records that I never hung on the walls. This was my real life. This was the museum of Thaddeus Moore. I parked the Impala next to the Porsche. I got out and covered it with a soft cloth tarp. "Rest now, girl," I whispered to the car. "You are safe." I locked the unit. I said goodbye to Sal. I got back into my truck. I drove home. The house was dark when I pulled in. Dante and Shelby were gone. They had taken an Uber to the airport for their morning flight. They were probably in the first-class lounge right now, drinking free champagne, laughing about the stupid old man and his junk car. I walked into the kitchen. The envelope with the $15,000 was gone. Dante had taken it. Of course he had. He needed walking around money for Paris. I sat down at the kitchen table. I was exhausted. My bones ached, but my mind was sharp. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text message from Dante. "Hey Dad, just boarded. Seats are amazing. Don't be mad about the car. Okay, Paris is going to be great. We needed this. Also, I know it is early, but can you transfer the monthly allowance a few days early? Shelby wants to buy a bag at the airport, and the exchange rate is killer. Love you." I stared at the screen. Don't be mad. Transfer the allowance. He didn't even ask if I was okay. He didn't care that he had stripped my garage bare. He just wanted more. He was a bottomless pit of need and entitlement. I looked at the empty space on the counter where the car keys used to be. I thought about the $50 million sitting in the storage unit. I thought about Bernice. "Don't let them take your voice," she had written. I wasn't going to let them take anything else. I opened my banking app on my phone. I navigated to the sub-account labeled Dante, Household and Expenses. It was the account I used to pay his credit card bills, his rent, his car lease. The account he thought was a magic well that never ran dry. I clicked on Settings. I clicked on Authorized Users. I saw Dante's name. I saw Shelby's name. I pressed Remove. Then I clicked on Card Status. I selected Report Lost, Stolen. I selected Freeze Account. The app asked for confirmation. "Are you sure you want to deactivate these cards? This action is immediate and irreversible." I looked at Dante's text again. "Love you." It was a lie. It was a transaction fee. I pressed Confirm. The screen flashed green. Success. Cards deactivated. I put the phone down. They were in the air now. They were flying to Paris on a ticket bought with stolen money. They were going to land in one of the most expensive cities in the world. And when they landed, they were going to find out that the Bank of Dad was closed. Permanently. I imagined the scene at the Ritz. I imagined the waiter bringing the bill. I imagined Shelby's face when the card declined. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who finally decides to stop bleeding. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was beginning to rise over Seattle, painting the clouds in bruised purples and angry oranges. "Enjoy Paris, son," I whispered, "because it is going to be a very long walk home." The silence in the house after Dante and Shelby left was heavy, but it was not peaceful. It was the suffocating silence of a crime scene after the perpetrators have fled. I stood by the bay window in the living room holding a cup of black coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Outside, the Seattle rain had turned into a light mist, acting like a gray filter over the world. I watched the taillights of their Uber Black disappear around the corner, carrying my son and his wife toward the airport, toward the first-class lounge, toward a life they believed they deserved but had never earned. I didn't go out to say goodbye. I didn't hug my son. I didn't tell them to have a safe flight. The father who used to do those things, who used to slip a $100 bill into Dante's pocket for walking around money, was gone. He had died the moment I saw the empty space in the garage where Bernice's Impala used to sit. That father was replaced by Thaddeus Moore, the man who survived the cutthroat music industry of the 70s, the man who buried his enemies with a smile and a handshake. I walked back to the kitchen table. The envelope with the $15,000 was gone, of course. Dante had snatched it up with a greed that made my stomach turn. He didn't leave a note. He didn't leave a thank you. He just took the cash and ran, leaving behind the wreckage of my heart. I sat down and pulled my phone from my pocket. I wasn't checking for an apology. I knew better than that. I opened the social media app that Shelby was addicted to. I needed to see it. I needed to see the arrogance with my own eyes. I needed the fuel. Her profile popped up immediately. She was live. The screen showed Shelby's face, perfectly lit by a ring light she must have brought with her to the airport. She was in the Delta Sky Club holding a mimosa. Dante was in the background eating from the buffet, looking smug and soft. "Hey guys," Shelby chirped. Her voice grated on my nerves like a needle on vinyl. "We are officially en route to Paris. Fashion Week, here we come. It has been such a crazy 24 hours. You wouldn't believe the drama we had to deal with to get here." She took a sip of her drink and rolled her eyes at the camera. "We are staying at the Ritz, obviously. Only the best. But getting here was a nightmare. We finally had to clear out some junk from Dante's dad's house. He is such a hoarder, you guys. He had this hideous old green car in the garage just taking up space collecting dust. It smelled like old people. You know that smell." I gripped the phone tighter. Hideous. She was talking about a masterpiece. Dante leaned into the frame, his mouth full of food. "It was a rust bucket, babe," he said. "We did him a favor." "Exactly," Shelby laughed. "We sold it to some scrap guy. Got enough cash to upgrade our seats and do some serious shopping on the Champs-Élysées. Honestly, we deserve this. Dealing with that is exhausting. He is so cheap. He walks around in these dirty flannel shirts like a hobo. You would never guess his son has such good taste." She panned the camera down to show off her designer luggage. "Anyway, we are free for a week. No more listening to his old stories about the good old days. We are going to live it up. Paris isn't ready for us." I watched the hearts float up the screen. I watched her followers validate her cruelty. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know she was spending stolen money. They didn't know she was mocking a man who could buy and sell her entire bloodline without checking his bank balance. I closed the app. The screen went black, reflecting my own face. I looked tired. I looked old. But my eyes were clear. They called me cheap. They called me a hoarder. They thought I was a helpless old man clinging to the past. It was time to show them the future. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for, Kenji Sato. Kenji was my wealth manager. He ran the family office that handled the royalties from the TK Legend catalog, the real estate investments, and the shell companies that protected my privacy. He was the only person besides Sal who knew exactly how deep my pockets were. I pressed call. Mr. Moore Kenji answered on the first ring. His voice was crisp, professional. "It is early. Is everything all right?" "No, Kenji," I said, my voice low and steady. "Everything is not all right. But we are going to fix it." "What do you need, sir?" "I need you to execute the containment protocol," I said. "On Dante." There was a brief pause. Kenji knew what that meant. We had discussed it years ago as a nuclear option, a failsafe in case Dante ever fell into drugs or serious trouble. "Are you sure, Sir?" Kenji asked. "This is a complete lockout." "I am sure," I said. "He is on his way to Paris," I continued. "He is traveling on my supplementary black card, the one linked to the main trust account." "Yes, sir. I see the charges pending. First-class tickets, lounge access." "Kill it," I said. "Kill the card." "Yes, sir." "Mark it as lost, stolen, or fraud." "Fraud," I said, "because that is what it is. He is spending money he didn't earn on a trip I didn't authorize." "Freeze the card, Kenji. Freeze Shelby's card, too." "The platinum one." "Done," Kenji said. "I am logging into the system now. They will be declined within 30 seconds. What about the bank accounts?" I leaned back in my chair, looking at the empty spot on the wall where a gold record used to hang before I hid it away. "Drain them," I said. "Not the money he earned. Leave him that. But the allowance account. The transfer account. The one I put $5,000 in every month to cover their rent and their car payments. Empty it. Put it back in the main trust." "Understood," Kenji said. "Sir, if I may ask what brought this on?" "He sold his mother's car, Kenji," I said. "He sold the Impala for 15 grand. I heard Kenji inhale sharply. He knew about the car. He knew about the masters hidden inside. "I am sorry, sir," he said softly. That is unforgivable." "We are not done," I said. "The penthouse." Dante and Shelby lived in a sprawling penthouse in downtown Seattle. It was a glass and steel fortress in the sky. They told their friends they owned it. They told everyone it was a wedding gift. But they didn't own it. The Moore family trust owned it. I bought the building in '95 when grunge was making me a fortune. I let them live there rent-free. I paid the HOA fees. I paid the electric bill. I paid for the water, the internet, the cable. They were guests, and they had just insulted the host. Call the building manager, I told Kenji. Tell him there is a maintenance emergency in penthouse B. Tell him the electrical grid is unstable. You want me to cut the power, Kenji asked. I want you to cut everything I said. Power, water, gas, internet. Change the digital locks on the front door. Reset the access codes for the elevator. When they come back from Paris, I want them to find a fortress they can't enter. I want their key fobs to be useless pieces of plastic. Sir, that is an eviction without notice. They evicted me from my own life, I said. They threw my wife's memory into the trash. I am just returning the favor. Do it, Kenji. And send a courier to the airport. A courier? Yes. I want you to deliver a letter to the airline desk. If they manage to get on the plane, which I doubt, I want them to know exactly why their return tickets are canceled. Canceled. One-way trip, Kenji, I said. If they want to come back to Seattle, they can swim. I will handle it, Mr. Moore. Anything else? No, I said. That is all for now. I hung up the phone. I sat there in the silence, feeling the wheels of my empire turning. For 30 years, I had used my power to build. I had built careers. I had built stars. I had built a fortune. Now I was using it to destroy. It felt different. It felt cold. But it also felt right. I stood up and walked to the refrigerator. I poured myself a glass of orange juice. I drank it standing at the sink, looking out at the rain. They were at the airport now. They were probably finishing their drinks, getting ready to head to the duty-free shops. Shelby loved duty-free. She loved buying perfumes she didn't need and sunglasses she would lose in a week. I checked my watch. It was 10 a.m. Their flight boarded in an hour. They would be walking into the Hermes store right about now. Shelby would be picking out a scarf or a bag. Dante would be standing behind her, pulling out the black metal card, the card that made him feel like a king. I closed my eyes and imagined the scene, the cashier ringing up the total. $4,000, maybe $5,000. Dante handing over the card with that casual arrogance he had perfected. The cashier inserting the chip, the pause, the long, awkward pause, and then the words, "I am sorry, sir." Declined. Dante would laugh. He would tell her to try again. He would say it was a mistake. He would say he was Dante Moore, son of Thaddeus Moore. She would try again. Declined. Call issuer. Shelby would get annoyed. She would tell him to use the other card, the one I paid for. Declined. Then she would try hers. Declined. The line behind them would start to grumble. The cashier would look at them with pity. The security guard would step a little closer. They would be stranded. No cash because they spent the car money on the upgrades. No credit because I cut the cord. They would be stuck in the terminal surrounded by luxury they couldn't touch. My phone rang. It was Dante. I stared at the screen. The name flashed. Son. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I picked it up on the 4th ring. "Hello," I said calmly. "Dad." Dante screamed. His voice was cracking, high-pitched with panic. "Dad, pick up." "Oh, thank God." "Dad, something is wrong. The cards, they aren't working. We are at the register. Shelby is trying to buy a bag and the card is declined. They say it is fraud. You need to call the bank. Fix it, Dad. Fix it now. People are staring at us." I took a sip of my orange juice. "I can't fix it, Dante," I said. "What do you mean you can't?" Dante yelled. "You are the account holder. Just call them. Tell them we are traveling. It is a security hold, right? It has to be." "It is not a security hold, son," I said. "It is a reality check." "What?" "Dad, what are you talking about? We board in 40 minutes. We need this sorted." "I canceled the cards, Dante," I said. There was a silence on the other end, a silence so profound I could hear the airport announcements in the background. You canceled them," Dante whispered. "Why?" "Because you sold the car," I said. "The car. Dad, come on. We talked about this. It was a junker. Are you really doing this over a car? This is insane. This is petty. Turn them back on, right now." "Shelby is crying, Dad. You are ruining our trip. You ruined my trust," I said. "You sold your mother's soul for a vacation. You called me cheap. You called me a hoarder. You laughed at me, Dante. You stood in my kitchen and laughed at me while you spent my money. So I stopped the money." "Dad, please," Dante begged. "We have no cash. We spent the 15 grand on the tickets and the hotel deposit. We have nothing. How are we supposed to eat? How are we supposed to get to the hotel? That sounds like a problem for a man who makes his own way, I said. You said you handled it. So handle it. Dad, stop it, Dante shouted. This isn't a lesson. This is abuse. You can't leave us here. We are in public. You are in public, I said, and you are broke. Welcome to the real world, son. It is cold and it is expensive. Dad, wait. I hung up the phone. I didn't just hang up. I turned the phone off. I put it on the table. I walked out of the kitchen. I walked into the living room and sat in my recliner. I picked up a book. I couldn't read the words. My eyes were blurry with tears I refused to shed. I had just cut off my own son. I had just stranded him in an airport with no money and a wife who would eat him alive when she found out the truth. It hurt. It hurt more than the arthritis in my knees. It hurt more than the loneliness of the last year. But it was necessary. He had to learn. He had to feel the floor drop out. He had to know that the safety net wasn't made of magic. It was made of my sweat. And I had just taken it away. I stared at the fireplace. The ashes were cold. They were going to Paris. Or they were trying to. If they managed to get on the plane, if the tickets were already issued, they would land in France with empty pockets. They would arrive at the Ritz and be turned away. They would be 2 American tourists with expensive luggage and no way to pay for a baguette. I hoped they got on the plane. I hoped they flew all the way to the City of Lights. Because the darker it got for them, the clearer they would see. I closed my eyes and waited for the next wave of pain. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange calm. The leech was gone. The wound was cauterized. Now I just had to wait for the healing to begin, or the infection to kill it all. Either way, I was done bleeding. The flight to Paris takes 10 hours from Seattle, but I knew the crash landing wouldn't happen on the runway. It would happen at the check-in desk of the Hotel Ritz. I sat in my leather recliner in the living room, the rain tapping against the glass like a nervous finger. It was 4 a.m. my time, but it was midday in France. I had a map open on my tablet tracking their flight. They had landed an hour ago. They had cleared customs. They were currently in a taxi speeding toward the Place Vendôme, expecting champagne and caviar. I poured myself another cup of coffee. I didn't need caffeine to stay awake. The adrenaline of the lesson was coursing through my veins, keeping me sharp. I imagined them in the back of that taxi. Shelby would be posting stories to her social media showing off the Eiffel Tower in the distance, tagging brands she couldn't afford. Dante would be trying to relax, telling himself that the credit card issue at the airport was just a glitch, a security hold that would be cleared up by the time they reached the hotel. He was wrong. The hold wasn't a glitch. It was a guillotine. I pictured the lobby of the Ritz. I had stayed there once back in '78 when I was producing a jazz record for a singer who refused to record anywhere else. It was a palace of marble and gold, where the air smelled of old money and fresh lilies. You didn't just walk into the Ritz, you glided. Dante and Shelby would walk in with their designer luggage, the luggage I paid for. They would approach the front desk. The concierge would greet them with that polite, distant French professionalism. Bonjour, Monsieur Moore. Welcome to the Ritz. Dante would hand over his passport and the black credit card. The card that was now a worthless piece of plastic. The concierge would swipe it. He would frown. He would type something into his computer. He would swipe it again. I am sorry, monsieur. The card has been declined. Dante would laugh that nervous bark I hated so much. Try it again, he would say. It is a black card. It doesn't decline. I have tried it twice, monsieur. The bank instructs us to retain the card. That was the moment. The moment the floor dropped out. My phone started to ring. It was Dante. I let it ring. I watched the screen light up and go dark. 1. It rang again immediately. 2. I took a sip of coffee. I picked up a book. I wasn't going to answer. Not yet. Not. Desperation needs time to cook. It needs to simmer until the panic boils over. The phone rang 10 times. 20. 30. By the 40th ring, I could almost hear Shelby screaming in the background. I could imagine the scene in the lobby, the line of wealthy guests forming behind them, the security guards stepping closer, the humiliation burning their skin like acid. They were standing in a palace of kings looking like paupers. 49. 50. I picked up on the 51st ring. Hello. My voice was groggy, thick with sleep I didn't feel. Who is this? Dad. Dante's voice was a shriek. It was high, thin, and terrified. Dad, thank God. Where have you been? We are at the hotel. They won't let us in. The card is dead, Dad. They cut it up. They cut up the black card right in front of me. I rubbed my eyes, making a show of waking up even though no one could see me. Dante, is that you? What time is it? It doesn't matter what time it is. We are stranded. The bank froze the accounts. You have to call them. You have to fix this now. Shelby is losing it, Dad. She is throwing a fit in the lobby. They are threatening to call the police. I let out a long, confused sigh. The sigh of an old man who can't keep up with the world. The bank, I mumbled. Oh, that is right. I think I forgot to pay the bill, son. What? Dante sounded like he had been punched in the gut. What do you mean you forgot? You have auto pay. You have accountants. I fired the accountants, I said, my voice drifting. Or maybe they quit. I don't remember. And the bill? It was on the counter. I must have put it in the recycling. I am sorry, Dante. My mind, it isn't what it used to be. You know how I get. You forgot to pay the bill, Dante screamed. Dad, this is a $50,000 limit card. You don't just forget that. Fix it. Wire the money. Transfer it from the trust. I can't do that, son, I said. The trust is complicated. I lost the password. I wrote it down on a napkin, but I think I used it to wipe up some oil in the garage. I heard a crash on the other end of the line. Shelby had grabbed the phone. Listen to me, you senile old bat, she hissed. Her voice was venom, pure concentrated hate. I know what you are doing. You are trying to ruin my trip. You are jealous. You are a bitter, lonely old man who hates seeing us happy. Fix this now, or I swear to God when I get back I will put you in the cheapest nursing home I can find. I will let you rot in your own filth. I held the phone away from my ear. Her threats didn't scare me. They just confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't family. She was a tumor. Shelby. I said, my voice trembling just enough to sell the act. Why are you yelling? I am just an old man. I made a mistake. You didn't make a mistake, she screamed. You are useless. We have no room. We have no way to get home. We are stuck in Paris with nothing. Nothing, I asked. My voice hardened slightly, dropping the senile act for just a second. What about the car money? There was a silence on the line. A sudden, heavy silence. The $15,000, I said slowly. The cash Dante got for selling his mother's soul. You have that right. That is $15,000. That is enough for a hotel. That is enough for food. Use that. I heard Dante breathing hard in the background. I heard the lobby noise of the Ritz, but I didn't hear the sound of relief. I heard panic. Shelby, I said, put Dante back on. Dante came back on the line. Dad, use the cash, Dante, I said. You sold the Impala. You have the envelope. Pay for the room with cash. It will get you through the week. Dante didn't answer. Dante, I said, where is the money? I heard him swallow. I gave it to Shelby, he whispered. At the airport. And she went to the duty-free. My grip on the phone tightened. I closed my eyes. I knew it. I knew it before he said it. She bought a bag. Dante whispered, his voice breaking. A Birkin, a vintage one, and some scarves. And, Dad, the money is gone. Gone. $15,000. The price of my wife's 30 years of labor. The price of our memories. Gone in 20 minutes at an airport gift shop. She had traded the Impala for a handbag. She spent every dime. Yeah, Dante cried. She said we didn't need it because we had the credit cards. She said we should invest in fashion. Dad, we have nothing. We have zero. We can't even pay for a cab to the airport to go home. I felt a coldness settle over me. It wasn't anger anymore. It was judgment. You have a bag, I said. Sleep in the bag. Dad, no. Please. Wire us $5,000, just enough to get home. We will leave tonight. I can't, I said, returning to my confused persona. I don't know how to wire money. The computer is... The buttons are too small, and my eyes are bad. I am sorry, son. I am just an old man. I can't help you. You have to help us. I have to go, I said. My show is coming on. The one about the antiques. I like that show. Dad. Good luck in Paris, son, I said. I hear the bridges are beautiful this time of year, especially if you have to sleep under them. I hung up the phone. I turned it off. I put it on the table. I sat there for a long time staring at the rain. They were stranded. They were 5,000 miles away with a $20,000 handbag and empty stomachs. They were about to learn what poverty tasted like. I imagined the next hour, the concierge at the Ritz asking them to leave, the security guards escorting them out, the realization that they couldn't go to another hotel, they couldn't go to a restaurant, they would have to walk. They would drag their heavy designer luggage through the streets of Paris. The rain would start because it always rains when you are down. Shelby's heels would blister her feet. Dante's suit would get soaked. They would look for a hostel, a cheap one. One that took cash if they had any spare change left, or maybe one that would let them trade a scarf for a bed. They would end up in the outskirts, in the banlieues, in a room with peeling wallpaper and a shared bathroom down the hall, a room that smelled of bleach and despair. Shelby would look at her Birkin bag sitting on the dirty floor. She would realize she couldn't eat leather. She would realize that status is heavy when you have to carry it yourself. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen. I opened the fridge and took out the ingredients for a sandwich. Ham, cheese, mustard, simple food. I made the sandwich, slowly spreading the mustard with care. I sat down and ate it. It tasted better than any meal I had eaten in a year. Because I knew that right now in a dark room in Paris my son was hungry. And for the first time in his life his hunger was his own fault. But I wasn't done. Shelby had threatened me. She said she would put me in a home. She said she would let me rot. She had declared her intentions. She had shown her hand. She thought she was coming back to exact revenge. She thought she was coming back to a confused old man she could bully into submission. She didn't know that the old man was already digging a trench. I finished my sandwich. I washed the plate. I went back to my study. I unlocked the door. I looked at the gold records hidden behind the curtains. I looked at the mixing board covered in dust. I turned on the equipment. The lights flickered to life. The hum of the amplifiers filled the room. It was time to make some noise. Shelby was coming for me. She would be back in a few days, angry, humiliated, and desperate. She would try to take the house. She would try to take my freedom. She was going to try the medical route, the competency hearing, the conservatorship. It was the standard playbook for greedy children. I picked up the phone again. I dialed Sal Russo. "Sal," I said. "Yeah, Thad. Do you know a doctor?" I asked. "A bad one. One who likes money more than medicine." Sal laughed. "I know a few." "Why?" "Because I need a diagnosis," I said. "I need someone to certify that I am losing my mind." Sal paused. "Thad, what are you playing at?" "I am setting a trap, Sal. A honeypot. Shelby is going to come back looking for a way to lock me up. I am going to give her the key." "And then what?" "And then," I said, looking at the reflection of my gray hair in the window, "I am going to lock her in with the monster she created. Find me the Dr. Sal, and find me a lawyer who isn't afraid to get his hands dirty." I hung up. I sat at the mixing board. I put my hands on the faders. I closed my eyes. I could hear the music in my head. It wasn't a jazz tune. It was a requiem for my son's marriage, and a war song for me. The rain in Seattle usually sounds like a lullaby against the cedar shingles of my roof, but tonight it sounded like a warning. I sat in my leather armchair in the living room, the only light coming from the fire I had built to chase away the damp chill. On the coffee table in front of me lay the pieces of my father's old Winchester shotgun. It wasn't loaded. It hadn't been fired since 1985. But the smell of the gun oil and the weight of the walnut stock in my hands gave me something to focus on. It gave me a center. I heard the taxi pull up outside. I didn't need to look out the window to know who it was. The car doors slammed with a violence that shook the frame of the house. Then came the footsteps stomping up the driveway. Heavy, angry steps. They were home early. They were supposed to be in Paris for a week, but poverty has a way of shortening vacations. The front door flew open. They didn't unlock it. They must have still had the key I forgot to take back. Dante walked in first. He looked like a man who had been chewed up and spit out by the world. His silk shirt was wrinkled and stained with sweat. His expensive loafers were scuffed. He was dragging a suitcase that looked lighter than when he left, probably because they had sold things to get back. Shelby followed him in. She looked deranged. Her hair was a bird's nest, her makeup smeared under her eyes like war paint. She wasn't wearing the designer outfit she had left in. She was wearing a cheap tracksuit, probably the only thing she could afford at a discount store near the airport. They saw me sitting there. The sight of me calm and composed, cleaning my gun, seemed to act as a trigger for the explosion. "You," Shelby shrieked. Her voice was a raw tear in the quiet room. "You are sitting there. You are just sitting there like nothing happened." I didn't look up. I ran an oily rag down the barrel of the shotgun. "Hello, Shelby," I said, my voice low and gravelly. "Hello, Dante. How was Paris? I hear the hostels are lovely this time of year." "You think this is funny?" she screamed, marching into the room. She threw her purse onto the floor. "We were humiliated, Thad. Humiliated. The hotel threw us out. We had to sleep in a motel that smelled like urine. We had to beg for a ride to the airport. We haven't eaten a real meal in 2 days." I picked up the trigger assembly. I examined it in the firelight. "You had $15,000, I said. "You had the money from your mother's car. If you went hungry, it is because you have poor money management skills." Dante stepped forward. His face was red. "Dad, stop it. You cut the cards. You stranded us. You knew what would happen." "I knew you would have to make a choice," I said. "I knew you would have to choose between buying a handbag and buying dinner. I see you made your choice." Shelby lunged at me, but Dante held her back. She was vibrating with rage. She looked around the room, looking for something to break, looking for a way to hurt me as much as her ego was hurting. Her eyes landed on this mantelpiece. There in the center was a large framed photograph of Bernice. It was taken in the studio back in '79. She was laughing, her head thrown back, wearing a simple sundress. It was my favorite picture of her. I kept a fresh vase of white lilies next to it every week. Shelby broke free from Dante. She ran to the fireplace. "You love her so much, don't you?" she hissed. "You love your dead wife more than your living son. You love your memories more than your family. Don't touch that, Shelby," I said, my voice dropping an octave. She grabbed the frame. She looked at me, her eyes wild. "She is dead, Thad," she screamed. "She is dead, and she is rotting, and this house is a shrine to a corpse." She threw the picture. It hit the hardwood floor with a sickening crash. The glass shattered. The silver frame bent. The flowers toppled over, spilling water across the hearth. I froze. My hand tightened on the steel barrel of the shotgun. The metal bit into my palm. For a second, the only sound in the room was the crackling of the fire and the heavy breathing of my daughter-in-law. I looked at the broken glass. I looked at Bernice's smiling face, now lying in a puddle of water surrounded by shards. Dante gasped. "Shelby," he whispered, "you shouldn't have done that." I stood up. I didn't rush. I moved with the slow, creaking stiffness of an old man, but with the size and weight of a bear. I held the barrel of the shotgun in one hand like a walking stick. I walked over to the mess. I knelt down, ignoring the pain in my knees. I picked up the photo. I brushed the glass off Bernice's face. The water had soaked into the corner of the print, but her smile was still there. I stood up and placed the photo gently on the table. Then I turned to Shelby. She took a step back. She saw something in my eyes that scared her. She saw the man who had negotiated with mobsters in the music industry. She saw the man who had buried his enemies. "Get out," I said. "This is Dante's house too," she yelled, trying to regain her bravado. "You can't kick us out. We have nowhere to go. You ruined our credit. You ruined our bank accounts. We are staying right here." "This is my house," I roared. The sound filled the room, shaking the windows. "My name is on the deed. My sweat paid for the walls. My wife made it a home, and you just desecrated it." I took a step toward her. "You think because I am old I am weak. You think because I am quiet I am stupid. You cut your own throat, Shelby. You just don't know it yet." She looked at the gun parts on the table. She looked at me. "Are you threatening me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Are you going to shoot us, old man?" I laughed. It was a dry, dusty sound. "I don't need a gun to deal with you," I said. "I just need to lock the door." Dante stepped between us. "Dad, please. She is tired. She is hungry. We are all tired. Just let us go to our room. We will talk in the morning." "Your room?" I asked. "You don't have a room here, Dante. You sold your room when you sold that car." "Dad, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," I said. "I am letting you sleep inside tonight because it is raining and I am not a monster. But tomorrow you are gone, both of you." I sat back down in my chair. I picked up the rag. I went back to cleaning the gun. "Go upstairs," I said, before I changed my mind. Shelby glared at me. She grabbed Dante's hand. "Come on," she said. "Let us get away from this lunatic." They walked toward the stairs. They were whispering furiously. They thought I couldn't hear them. They thought my 74-year-old ears were failing just like the rest of me. But they didn't know about the earpiece. I wore a hearing aid in my left ear. It looked like a standard beige medical device, the kind you buy at a pharmacy. Dante had made fun of it a month ago, calling it my grandpa gear. But it wasn't a hearing aid. It was a high-fidelity audio enhancer, a prototype from my studio days updated with modern tech. I used it to mix tracks in the 70s to hear the breath of a singer between notes. It could pick up a whisper from 3 rooms away. I turned up the volume on the small dial in my pocket. The static cleared. Their voices came through crystal clear as if they were standing right next to me. They reached the top of the stairs. They went into the guest room and slammed the door. I heard the rustle of clothes. I heard Shelby pacing. "He is insane," she whispered, her voice sharp and panicked. "Did you see his eyes? He is dangerous, Dante. He was cleaning a gun. He is going to kill us in our sleep." "He won't kill us," Dante said, his voice weary. "He is just mad about the car. He loved Mom. It is not just the car," Shelby snapped. "It is everything. He cut the money. He froze the accounts. He is losing it, Dante. This is dementia, paranoid dementia. My grandmother had it. They get aggressive. They start hoarding money. They turn on their family." "He seemed pretty lucid to me," Dante said. "That is the trap," Shelby said. "They have moments of clarity. But look at him. He is sitting in the dark, playing with a weapon, talking about respect. He is gone, Dante. The father you knew is gone." There was a silence. Then Shelby's voice dropped lower, sweeter, more calculating. "We have to do something, babe. We can't live like this. We can't be homeless." "What can we do?" Dante asked. "He owns everything." "Not if he is incompetent," Shelby said. I stopped cleaning the gun. I held my breath. "What do you mean?" Dante asked. "Conservatorship," Shelby whispered. "Like they did with that pop star. If we can prove he is a danger to himself and others. If we can prove he is senile. The court will give us control." Dante hesitated. "Control of what?" "Control of the estate," Shelby said. "Control of the house. Control of the accounts. We become his guardians. We make the decisions. We can sell this dusty old mausoleum. We can move him into a facility where he will be safe, where he can't hurt anyone." "Put him in a home?" Dante asked. "A nice home," Shelby said quickly, "with doctors and nurses. And we get the power of attorney. We get the money, Dante. We get it all. We can fix the debt. We can pay off the credit cards. We can live the life we are supposed to live." I listened to the silence that followed. I waited for my son to defend me. I waited for him to say, "No, Shelby, that is my father. He isn't crazy. He is just hurt." But he didn't. "Do you think we can do it?" Dante asked. "I know a doctor," Shelby said. "Dr. Grimes. He helped my friend with her aunt. He is flexible. If we pay him enough, he will sign the evaluation. He will say whatever we need him to say." "But we don't have money to pay him," Dante said. "We will have money once we control the accounts," Shelby said. "We just need to get him to the house. We need to invite Grimes over, maybe for dinner. We tell Thad it is a peace offering, a friend. Grimes observes him. He sees the gun. He hears the aggression. He signs the paper. Bam! We are in charge." I closed my eyes. The pain in my chest was a physical weight. My son, the boy I taught to catch a baseball. He was listening to his wife plot to lock me away. He was considering it. "Okay," Dante said softly. "Okay, let's do it. Before he cuts us out of the will entirely," good Shelby said. "I will call Grimes in the morning. We are going to take this house back, Dante, and we are going to send that old man where he belongs." I reached up and turned down the volume on my earpiece. I didn't need to hear anymore. I sat there in the firelight. I looked at the broken picture of Bernice. They wanted to play doctor. They wanted to diagnose me. They thought I was a confused old man who was losing his grip on reality. They thought they could trick me into a cage. They didn't know that TK Legend had dealt with sharks bigger and hungrier than them. They didn't know that I had negotiated contracts with men who dissolved their problems in acid. I picked up the barrel of the shotgun. I slid it into the receiver. Click, clack. I wasn't going to shoot them. That was too easy. That was too messy. If they wanted to prove I was crazy, I would give them a show. I would give them a performance worthy of an Oscar. I would let them bring their doctor. I would let them set their trap. And then I would spring mine. I stood up. I walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The moon was out cold and bright. "You want a conservatorship, Shelby?" I whispered to the reflection in the glass. "You want control." I walked to my desk. I unlocked the drawer. I pulled out a file. It wasn't a medical file. It was a dossier on Dr. Grimes. Sal had mentioned him once. A pill mill doctor. A man with a gambling debt and a suspended license in 2 states. I smiled. Bring him over, I thought. Bring your flexible doctor. I am going to put on a show that will make you wish you had stayed in Paris. I turned off the lamp. The room plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the dying embers of the fire. The old man was gone. The producer was in the building. And it was time to direct the final act. The setup for my own demise was surprisingly elegant. Shelby had set the dining room table with the good china, the plates Bernice had saved for Christmas dinner. She had lit candles and bought a roast that smelled of rosemary and garlic. It was a domestic scene straight out of a magazine, but the undercurrent of tension was so thick it felt like the air was charged with static electricity. I sat in my usual chair at the head of the table wearing a mismatched flannel shirt and sweatpants that I had intentionally stained with coffee earlier that morning. I wanted to look disheveled. I wanted to look like a man who had stopped caring because he had stopped remembering. Underneath the sweatpants taped to my inner thigh was a plastic bladder filled with warm water and yellow food coloring. A small tube ran down my leg, ending just above my ankle. It was a trick I had learned from a special effects guy back in the 70s when we were shooting a music video that involved a fake medical emergency. Today the emergency was fake, but the stakes were real. I checked the valve one last time with my thumb through the fabric of my pocket. It was ready. The doorbell rang at 7 sharp. Shelby jumped up, her face a mask of nervous energy. She smoothed her dress and shot Dante a look. "Be nice," she hissed. "And make sure he drinks the wine. We need him relaxed." Dante nodded. He wouldn't look at me. He was pouring himself a glass of scotch, his hand shaking slightly. He knew what was coming. He knew they were bringing in a hitman with a stethoscope. Shelby opened the door and Dr. Grimes walked in. He didn't look like a doctor. He looked like a used car salesman who had found a medical degree in a dumpster. He was wearing a suit that was too shiny and a watch that was too big. His eyes were small and shifty, constantly scanning the room as if he were appraising the furniture. Dr. Grimes Shelby cooed, extending her hand. "Thank you so much for coming on such short notice. We are just desperate. We don't know what to do with him." Grimes took her hand and held it a second too long. "It is my pleasure, Mrs. Moore. I specialize in difficult cases. Geriatric competency is a subtle art. Sometimes the decline is rapid." He looked at me. I stared back, letting my jaw hang slack, my eyes unfocused. I didn't blink. I just stared at his forehead as if I were seeing something that wasn't there. "Hello, Sir," Grimes said, walking over to me. "I am Dr. Grimes. I am a friend of your son." I looked at Dante. "Who is he?" I mumbled, my voice thick and raspy. "Is he the tax man? Did he come for the car?" Dante flinched. "No, Dad. He is just a friend. We are having dinner." "I don't like him," I said loud enough for Grimes to hear. "He smells like sulfur." Grimes chuckled, a dry, hollow sound. "Paranoia. Very common. Shall we eat?" We sat down. The dinner was a theater of cruelty. Shelby and Grimes talked about me as if I weren't there. They discussed my assets, my house, my condition. "He wanders at night." Shelby lied, effortlessly cutting her meat. "He leaves the stove on. He talks to people who aren't there. Yesterday I found him in the garden trying to bury his wallet. He said the squirrels were IRS agents." Grimes nodded, scribbling in a small notebook he had placed next to his plate. "Disorientation, delusions, inability to manage financial affairs. It paints a clear picture, Mrs. Moore." I ate my mashed potatoes with my hands. I grabbed a handful and shoved it into my mouth, letting some of it fall onto my shirt. I saw Shelby curl her lip in disgust. "Look at him," she whispered. "He is an animal." "He can't live here anymore, Doctor. It isn't safe for us. What if he gets violent?" I wiped my hand on the tablecloth, leaving a greasy smear. I looked at the empty chair next to me, the chair where Bernice used to sit. "Bernice," I said softly, my voice changing tone, becoming gentle and loving. "Bernice, honey, pass the salt. The meat is bland." The table went silent. Dante stopped chewing. He looked at the empty chair, then at me, his eyes filled with tears. "Dad," he whispered. "Mom isn't there. She is right there." I snapped, looking at him with sudden anger. "Don't be rude, Dante. Say hello to your mother. She made this roast." Dante looked down at his plate. He couldn't handle it. The guilt was eating him alive, but his greed was still hungry, so he stayed silent. Grimes wrote in his notebook, Visual hallucinations, complete break from reality. This was it. I had given them the show. Now I needed to give them the finale. I needed to do something so repulsive, so undeniable that they would sign the papers immediately just to get me out of their sight. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the wood floor. "I have to go," I announced. "I have to go to the station. The train is leaving." "Sit down," Thad Shelby snapped. "You aren't going anywhere." "I have to go," I yelled, waving my arms. The train. "Bernice is on the train." I reached into my pocket and found the valve. I twisted it open. The warm liquid released. It flowed down my legs, soaking the gray sweatpants, darkening the fabric instantly. It pooled on the expensive rug Shelby had bought with my money. It splashed onto the hardwood floor. I stood there letting it happen, looking down at my legs with a look of utter confusion and shame. "Oh," I whispered. "I made a spill." Shelby screamed. She jumped up from the table, knocking over her wine glass. "Oh my God," she shrieked, backing away. "He wet himself. He is peeing on the rug. This is disgusting." Dante stood up, his face pale. "Dad." "Oh God, Dad." Grimes stood up, but he didn't look disgusted. He looked satisfied. He looked like a man who had just gotten exactly what he needed. "Incontinence," he said, his voice devoid of empathy. "Loss of autonomic control. This is the final stage, Mrs. Moore. He is completely invalid." "Get him out of here," Shelby yelled, pointing at me. "Get him out of my dining room. He is ruining everything." I stood in the puddle, trembling. I wasn't trembling from cold. I was trembling from the sheer effort of not breaking character. It was the most humiliating thing I had ever done. I was a legend. I was a king in my industry. And here I was standing in my own home, soaked in fake urine, playing the fool for a woman who wasn't fit to shine my wife's shoes. But it worked. It worked perfectly. Grimes pulled a document from his briefcase. It was thick, heavy with legal jargon. He slammed it onto the table right next to the roast beef. "I have seen enough," he said. "I am prepared to sign the 5150 hold and the certificate of incapacity. This man is a danger to himself and others. He requires immediate custodial care. Isolation. He cannot be left alone for a minute. Sign it." Shelby said, her voice shaking with rage and triumph. "Sign it now. We are taking him to Sunnyvale tonight. I am not spending another night in the house with this vegetable." Sunnyvale. I knew the place. It wasn't a care facility. It was a dumping ground, a converted motel on the edge of town where families dropped off their elderly relatives when the money ran out. It smelled of bleach and death. That was where she was sending me. Grimes uncapped his pen. He looked at me one last time. "Mr. Moore," he said, "do you know what is happening?" I looked at him. I let a line of drool escape my lip. "I missed the train," I whispered. Grimes smirked. "Yes, you did." He signed the paper. He signed away my freedom. He signed away my rights. He declared me legally incompetent based on a dinner theater performance. He handed the paper to Shelby. "Here is your guardianship," he said. "You have full power of attorney, effective immediately pending the court's rubber stamp on Monday. You control the assets. You control the medical decisions. You control him." Shelby took the paper. She held it like it was a holy relic. She looked at it, and then she looked at me. Her eyes were shining, not with tears, but with greed. Finally, she whispered. "Finally." She turned to Dante. "Get the car," she ordered. "We are taking him now." Dante looked at me. He looked at the puddle on the floor. He looked at his father, the man who had raised him, standing there broken and wet. "Daddy," said, his voice cracking, "I am sorry, but it is for the best. You need help." I didn't answer. I couldn't. If I spoke now, I would roar. Dante ran to get the car. Shelby went to the hall closet and grabbed a coat. She threw it at me. "Put this on," she said. "Cover yourself up. You smell." I put on the coat. I buttoned it with slow, clumsy fingers. Grimes was packing his bag. "My fee, Mrs. Moore," he said. Shelby reached into her purse. She pulled out an envelope. It was thick. $10,000 cash, money she had withdrawn from the joint account before I froze it. "Here," she said, tossing it to him. "Worth every penny." Grimes checked the envelope. He smiled. "Pleasure doing business with you. Call me if you need the death certificate expedited when the time comes." He walked out the door. I stood there alone with Shelby for a moment. She walked up to me. She stood inches from my face. She wasn't afraid of me anymore. She thought I was a toothless dog. "You see this house, Thad?" she hissed, gesturing to the room. "It is mine now. The walls, the furniture, the view, it is all mine. And you know what I am going to do first?" I stared at her blankly. "I am going to burn all those ugly old records in your study," she said. "And then I am going to turn it into a shoe closet." She laughed. I lowered my head. I hid my eyes. Because in that moment, I wasn't acting. I was memorizing. I was etching her face into my mind. I was recording her voice, her words, her cruelty. She thought she had won. She thought she held the paper that gave her the kingdom. She didn't know that what she held was a confession. She had bribed a doctor. She had falsified medical evidence. She had kidnapped a sane man. She had just committed 3 felonies in front of a witness she thought was brain dead. Dante honked the horn outside. "Let's go, old man," Shelby said, grabbing my arm. "Your carriage awaits." She dragged me toward the door. I stumbled, I tripped, but I kept moving. I walked out of my house, leaving the puddle on the floor, leaving the dinner uneaten. I was going to Sunnyvale. I was going to prison, but I wasn't going alone. I was taking their future with me. And when I came back, I wouldn't be the old man who missed the train. I would be the conductor, and I was going to run them off the tracks. The drive to Sunnyvale was a 40-minute journey into the heart of betrayal. I sat in the passenger seat of Dante's leased BMW, watching the rain streak across the glass, blurring the world outside into a gray smear. Dante had the radio on low, some mindless pop station that filled the silence he was too cowardly to break. He gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, his eyes fixed on the road, refusing to look at me. He was nervous. He should be. He was driving his father to a prison disguised as a care home. "Dad," he said finally, his voice tight. "You are going to like this place. Shelby did a lot of research. It has a garden. It has a recreation room. They have bingo nights. It is a community. You have been so lonely in that big house since Mom died. This is better. You will be safe here. Safe." He used that word like a shield. He wasn't taking me there for my safety. He was taking me there for his security. He needed me out of the way so he could sell the house, so he could strip the copper out of the walls of my life. I didn't answer him. I let my head loll against the window. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I played the part of the confused, medicated old man. I needed him to believe it. I needed him to commit fully to the sin. We pulled off the highway and into an industrial park on the edge of the city. This wasn't a neighborhood. It was a graveyard for failed businesses. We passed a closed-down tire shop and a fenced-off lot filled with rusted shipping containers. And there at the end of a dead-end street was Sunnyvale. It didn't look like the brochure Shelby had probably printed off the internet. It looked like a converted motel that had been condemned in the 90s. The paint was peeling, exposing the damp gray concrete underneath. The windows were barred. The sign out front was missing the letter V, so it read, "Sunny Ale Care." There was no garden. There was a patch of dirt with a few dead weeds choking in the mud. "This is it," Dante said, pulling up to the curb. He sounded unsure now. The reality of the place was hitting him, but his greed was stronger than his conscience. "It has character." He came around and opened my door. He grabbed my arm. He didn't help me out. He pulled me. He was in a rush. He wanted to drop the package and run. We walked into the lobby. The smell hit me instantly. It was a cocktail of bleach-boiled cabbage and human despair. It was the smell of a place where people came to wait for the end. The floors were scuffed linoleum. The lights flickered with a low, buzzing hum that drilled into your skull. A woman sat behind a plexiglass window. She was wearing scrubs that looked like they hadn't been washed in a week. She didn't look up when we walked in. Checking in, Dante said, his voice cracking slightly. "Thaddeus Moore." Dr. Grimes sent over the paperwork. The woman typed on a keyboard with long fake nails. Click, click, click. "Yeah, we got the facts," she said, popping gum. "Room 4B, down the hall, last door on the left. Payment is processed monthly. Don't be late. We don't keep delinquents." Dante nodded, swallowing hard. He looked at me. I was staring at a stain on the wall, swaying slightly on my feet. "Come on, Dad," he said. "Let us get you settled." He led me down the hallway. We passed rooms with open doors. I saw elderly men sitting in wheelchairs staring at blank televisions. I saw a woman crying softly in her bed, calling out a name that no one answered. I saw the neglect in the peeling wallpaper and the stained ceiling tiles. This wasn't a care facility. It was a warehouse for the unwanted. We reached room 4B. It was a small square box with 2 beds. One was occupied by a man who was asleep or unconscious, his breathing a ragged rattle. The other bed was empty. It had a thin mattress and a single flat pillow. "Here we are," Dante said, forcing a brightness into his tone that was sickening. "Look, Dad, you have a roommate. You guys can talk." He put my small bag on the bed. The bag contained 2 flannel shirts, a pair of pants, and a photo of Bernice. That was all he let me take. "I am going to go now," Dad, Dante said, backing toward the door. I have to meet the realtor for the house, but I will be back. I promise. Once we sell the place, once we get the money sorted, I will come get you. We will find a better place. This is just temporary, just until we get back on our feet." He was lying. I knew it. He knew it. He was never coming back. He was going to sell the house, spend the money, and leave me here to rot until the state buried me in a pauper's grave. I turned to him. I straightened my back just a fraction. I looked him directly in the eyes. The fog in my gaze cleared for a second, sharp and lucid. "Dante," I said, my voice low. I said my voice. He froze, hand on the doorknob. "Yeah, Dad. Are you sure?" I asked. "Are you sure you want to leave me here?" He looked at me. He looked at the squalor of the room. He looked at the father who had paid for his college, who had bought him his first car, who had bailed him out of every mistake he ever made. He had a choice. He could turn back. He could take my hand and walk out of this hellhole. He hesitated. For a second I saw the conflict in his eyes, but then he thought about the money. He thought about Shelby. He thought about Paris. "I have to." "Dad," he whispered, "it is for the best." He turned the knob. "Goodbye," he said, and he walked out. I listened to his footsteps receding down the hall. I heard the heavy security door clack shut. I heard the engine of his car start and fade away into the rain. He was gone. He had done it. He had abandoned me. The room was silent except for the wheezing of the man in the next bed. I stood there for a moment, letting the feeling of betrayal wash over me. It was cold and dark like the bottom of a well, but beneath the cold there was fire. He thought he had left a helpless old man in a cage. He didn't know he had just locked himself out of the kingdom. I reached into my boot. Taped to my ankle was a small black device, a satellite phone, military-grade encryption. The kind of phone you use when you need to move mountains without anyone hearing the rumble. I pulled it off. I turned it on. The screen glowed green in the dim light. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Saul Goldman answered on the first ring. "Zeke," he said, his voice tense. "Are you all right?" "Did he do it?" "He did it," I said. My voice wasn't the voice of a confused senior anymore. It was the voice of the chairman. "I am in." "Where are you?" "Sunnyvale," I said. "Room 4B. It smells like bleach and bad decisions." "I am sorry," Zeke Saul said. "I know you wanted to give him a chance." "I gave him a chance," I said. "I gave him a lifetime of chances. He just spent the last one." "What are your orders, sir?" "Activate Operation Phoenix," I said. There was a pause. The line crackled. Phoenix Saul repeated. "That is the scorched earth protocol, Zeke. That liquidates everything. The accounts, the properties, the trusts. It triggers the foreclosure on the penthouse. It freezes his assets. It notifies the creditors. It destroys him. Zeke." I looked around the room. I looked at the man dying in the bed next to me, a man who probably had children who forgot him too. "Destroy him," I said. "Burn it down, Saul. Every brick, every dollar. I want him to wake up tomorrow morning with nothing but the suit on his back and the debt in his name." "Understood," Saul said. "It is done. Anything else?" "Yes," I said. "I want to leave. Now." I hung up the phone. I put it in my pocket. I walked out of the room. I walked down the hallway past the moaning residents, past the nurse who ignored me. I walked into the lobby. The woman behind the glass looked up. "Hey!" she shouted. "Where do you think you are going, Grandpa? You can't leave. This is a secure facility. Get back to your room or I call the orderlies." I stopped. I looked at her. I didn't say a word. I just pointed to the front door. Through the dirty glass, a convoy of black SUVs pulled into the lot. 4 of them. Escalades with tinted windows. They surrounded the entrance. The woman stood up, her mouth open. "Who is that?" The doors of the lead SUV opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a suit that cost more than this entire building. He walked into the lobby, flanked by 2 security guards. It was Mr. Sterling, the CEO of the healthcare conglomerate that owned the largest chain of luxury nursing homes in the state, a conglomerate that was secretly a subsidiary of Moore Holdings. He walked right up to me. He ignored the woman behind the desk. He ignored the smell. He bowed his head slightly. "Mr. Chairman," he said. The woman behind the glass dropped her phone. "Mr. Chairman." I looked at Sterling. "You are late," I said. "Traffic," Sir Sterling said apologetically. "We have the paperwork ready. The acquisition was completed 10 minutes ago." "Acquisition," the receptionist stammered. I turned to her. "I bought the building," I said. "Yesterday, through a shell company." She stared at me. Her gum fell out of her mouth. You own Sunnyvale." "I own it," I said. "And you are fired." I turned back to Sterling. "Get these people help," I said, pointing down the hall. "Real help. Doctors, nutritionists, clean this place up. I want this building gutted and renovated. I want these people treated like human beings, not inventory. Do it by the end of the week." "Yes, sir," Sterling said. "And for you." "Take me home," I said. "I have a house to clean." I walked out the front door. The rain had stopped. The air was cold but fresh. I got into the back of the Escalade. I sat on the leather seat. Dante thought he had put me in a hole. He didn't know I owned the shovel. He thought he had won the game. He didn't know I had just flipped the board. "Driver, take me to the estate," I said. We pulled away, leaving the hellhole behind. Dante was probably at a bar right now celebrating. He was probably toasting to his freedom. He didn't know that the bill was coming due. And I was the one collecting. Operation Phoenix was live, the fire was lit, and my son was about to feel the heat. The silence of my own home was broken not by music or laughter, but by the greedy scratching of a pen against a notepad. I watched from the high-definition monitor in the security office of my new luxury facility. It was the finest nursing home in the state, a place I actually owned, but Dante and Shelby thought I was rotting in the squalor of Sunnyvale. They thought I was out of the picture, a vegetable they had planted in a dark corner to wither away. They didn't know I was sitting in a leather chair drinking espresso and watching them dig their own graves in real time. Inside my living room, Shelby was walking around with a real estate agent. She was wearing one of my wife's silk robes, having raided Bernice's closet the moment she thought I was gone. She looked like a queen surveying a kingdom she had stolen. She pointed at the grand piano, the one I had composed my first hit on, and waved her hand dismissively. "We want to sell it furnished," she told the agent, her voice tinny through the speakers. "Everything goes. The art, the furniture, the knickknacks. We want a clean break. We need the liquidity fast. We are planning to move to Europe permanently once the funds clear." Dante was sitting on the sofa drinking my scotch straight from the bottle. He looked nervous. He kept checking his phone, probably waiting for the call confirming the power of attorney. He didn't know that the paper he held was worthless. He didn't know that the judge was already reviewing the evidence of his fraud. I picked up my own phone. It was time to pull the next thread. For 5 years, I had let them live in the penthouse downtown. It was a beautiful apartment overlooking the water, a place I had bought as an investment in the 90s. I paid the mortgage, the utilities, the condo fees. I paid for the doorman to park their cars and carry their bags. I had created a bubble of luxury for them, hoping that if they had a nice place to live, they would build a nice life. Instead, they just built a fortress of entitlement. I dialed the number for the building management company, a subsidiary of Moore Holdings. "Execute the eviction," I said. "Immediate lockout. Put their personal effects on the curb." "But sir," the manager stammered. "It is raining." "I know," I said. "Do it." I hung up and watched the screen. 30 minutes later, Dante's phone rang. He answered it lazily. "Hello." I saw his face change. The color drained out of it, leaving him looking like gray putty. He stood up so fast he knocked over the bottle of scotch. It spilled onto the Persian rug, a dark stain spreading like blood. "What do you mean locked out?" he screamed. "That is my apartment. I live there. You can't change the locks. My father owns that unit." He listened for a moment, then his eyes went wide. "He did what?" "He terminated the lease." "That is impossible. He is..." He is incapacitated. Shelby stopped talking to the agent. She looked at Dante. "What is going on?" she hissed. "They locked us out," Dante whispered, lowering the phone. "The building manager. He says Dad canceled the lease agreement this morning. He says we are trespassing." "They put our stuff on the street, Shelby." "What?" Shelby shrieked. "My clothes, my shoes." "On the street," Dante said. "In the rain." The real estate agent looked uncomfortable. "I think I should go," she said, backing toward the door. "Call me when you have the title sorted out." She left, leaving them alone in the echoing house. "We have to go," Shelby yelled, grabbing her car keys. "We have to get my things. If my Louboutins get wet, I will kill someone." They ran out of the house. I switched the feed to the camera I had installed in the lobby of the penthouse building. I watched them arrive 20 minutes later. It was pouring rain. A pile of soggy cardboard boxes and plastic bags sat on the wet pavement outside the glass doors of the lobby. It looked like trash day. Shelby jumped out of the car without an umbrella. She ran to the pile, screaming. She ripped open a bag. It was full of her designer dresses, now soaked and ruined. She pulled out a shoe. It was filled with water. She turned to the doorman, who was standing safely behind the glass, arms crossed. "Open the door," she screamed, pounding on the glass. "Let us in." The doorman shook his head. He pointed to a piece of paper taped to the glass. "Eviction notice." Dante was trying to gather the boxes, trying to shove them into the trunk of his car, but they were falling apart, the bottom dropping out of a box of his expensive watches, spilling them into the gutter. "This can't be happening," he was muttering. "He is senile. He is in a home. How did he do this?" I smiled. He was starting to realize that the old lion still had claws, but the loss of the apartment was just the jab. The knockout punch was coming. I picked up my phone again. I called a number I hadn't used in years. It belonged to a man named Rocco. Rocco wasn't a banker. He wasn't a lawyer. Rocco was a collector. He bought bad debt from casinos and bookies. He was legitimate on paper, but his methods were persuasive. I had been paying Dante's gambling debts for 3 years. Every time he got in too deep with the online sports books or the underground poker games, I would get a quiet call. I would wire the money. I told myself I was saving him from danger. I was keeping him safe. But today I wasn't saving him. "Rocco," I said. "The debt is due, Mr. Moore." Rocco said, his voice like grinding stones. "You want to cover it again?" "No," I said. "I am done covering it. Go collect." "He is at the estate." "Understood." I switched the camera feed back to my house. Dante and Shelby had returned. They were wet, shivering, and furious. They had dumped the soggy remains of their life in the hallway. Shelby was pacing the living room like a wet cat. "He did this," she spat. "The old man did this. He must have set it up before we took him away." "It is a trap, Dante." "It doesn't matter." Dante set his head in his hands. "We have this house. We have the power of attorney. We just need to sell it fast. We need the cash, Shelby." "Why?" she asked. "Why are you so desperate for cash?" "We have credit cards." Dante didn't answer. He couldn't tell her. He couldn't tell her that the credit cards were maxed out, that the bank accounts were frozen, that he had gambled away the rent money for the last 6 months thinking I would cover it. The doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite ring. It was a heavy, demanding pounding that shook the doorframe. Dante jumped. "Who is that?" "Go check," Shelby snapped. Dante walked to the door. He opened it. Rocco stood there. He was a mountain of a man wearing a leather jacket that cost more than Dante's car. He had 2 men with him. They looked like they ate concrete for breakfast. "Dante Evans," Rocco said. Dante went pale. Who are you?" "I am the guy you owe $200,000 to," Rocco said, stepping into the foyer. Dante stumbled back. No, that is a mistake. My father, he handles that." "Your father stopped handling it," Rocco said. "He called me. He said the bank of Dad is closed. He said I should come talk to you, so here I am. Let us talk." Shelby walked into the hallway. She saw the big men. She saw the fear in her husband's eyes. "Who are these people, Dante?" she asked. "What is going on?" Dante couldn't speak. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. Rocco looked at Shelby. He smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Your husband likes to play poker," Mrs. Evans, Rocco said. "He is not very good at it. He owes the house $200,000, plus interest." Shelby froze. She looked at Dante. 200,000, she whispered. You told me you were investing. You told me that money was for the business. I was going to win it back. Dante stammered. I had a system, Shelby. A system, she screamed. You lost $200,000. That is why the accounts are empty. That is why we have no money. She didn't wait for an answer. She flew at him. She wasn't the elegant socialite anymore. She was a fury. She clawed at his face. She punched him in the chest. She screamed inarticulately, a sound of pure rage and betrayal. You liar, she shrieked. You loser. You told me we were rich. You told me your father would pay for everything. Dante tried to defend himself, but he was weak. He fell back against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor, his hands covering his face while his wife beat him. Rocco watched his arms crossed. He looked bored. Hey, he barked. Enough domestic violence. I want my money. Shelby stopped. She was panting, her hair wild, her eyes crazy. She looked at Rocco. We don't have it, she said. We have nothing. Look at this place. It is full of wet garbage. Rocco looked around. Nice house, he said. Big, valuable. It is not our house, Shelby said. It is the old man's house. But you have power of attorney, right? Rocco asked. I heard you talking about it. You can sell it. Shelby looked at him. She looked at Dante bleeding on the floor. She looked at the house. Yes, she said slowly. Yes, we can. Good, Rocco said. Then you have 48 hours. Sell the house. Get me my money, or I start taking pieces of your husband. And I will start with the fingers he uses to hold the cards. He turned to leave. 48 hours, he repeated. Tick-tock. The door closed. Shelby stood there staring at the door. Then she turned to Dante. Get up, she said. Her voice was cold, dead. Dante looked up. Shelby! Get up, she screamed, kicking him. We have to sell this house. We have to sell it now. I don't care what price we get. I don't care if we have to give it away. We need that money, Dante. But, Dad, Dante whispered, he will be homeless. I don't care about your dad, Shelby hissed. I don't care if he dies in that nursing home. I care about me. I care about not getting killed by loan sharks because I married a loser. She walked to the phone. She dialed the number for the real estate agent. Hello? She said, her voice instantly changing to a sweet professional tone. Yes, it is Shelby. We are ready to list. Yes, immediately. We want a quick sale. Cash offers only. Price it to move. Yes, today. I watched from my monitor. They were desperate. They were terrified. They were willing to sell my legacy for pennies on the dollar to save their own skins. They thought they had 48 hours. They didn't know that I had already bought the clock. And the alarm was about to ring. I picked up my phone. I called Sal Russo. Sal, I said. I am here, Thad. It is time, I said. Get the team ready. The auction is starting. And I want to be the only bidder. But not for the house. For their souls. I hung up. I poured myself another espresso. The penthouse was gone. The cars were gone. The pride was gone. Now they were going to lose the only thing they had left. Hope. I watched Shelby pacing the room, listing my furniture on marketplace apps while Dante wept on the floor. You wanted a quick sale, Shelby, I whispered to the screen. You are going to get one, but you are not going to like the price. The auction of my life began at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. I sat in the private office of the care facility director watching the live stream on a wall-mounted monitor. The camera feed was crisp, high definition, broadcasting the desecration of my home to the world. Shelby had hired a liquidator, a man named Mr. Sneed, who looked like a vulture in a cheap suit, to turn my memories into quick cash. He had set up a podium in my foyer, right on the spot where Bernice and I used to dance on New Year's Eve. The house was full of strangers, dealers, collectors, and neighbors who had come to pick over the carcass of the Moore estate. They walked through my rooms, touching my furniture, handling my art, examining the porcelain figurines Bernice had loved so much. I watched a woman in a fur coat pick up a vase my mother had given me, turning it over to check for a maker's mark. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a tightness that had nothing to do with my heart and everything to do with my rage. Shelby stood near the podium. She was wearing a black dress, trying to look like the grieving daughter-in-law forced to make hard decisions, but her eyes were bright with avarice. She held a glass of champagne, sipping it nervously as she watched the bitters register. Dante stood next to her, looking pale and sick. He knew this was wrong. He knew that every item being sold was a piece of his history. But he was too weak to stop her. He was a passenger in the car wreck of his own life. I picked up my phone. I dialed Kenji. "Are you in position?" I asked. "I am in the back row," Sir Kenji replied through his earpiece. His voice was calm, professional. "I am registered as bidder number 42, representing an anonymous private collector from Tokyo." "Good," I said. "Buy it all, Kenji. Every stick of furniture, every painting, every rug. I don't care what it costs. I am not letting those vultures take Bernice's things." "Understood, sir. And the prices." "Drive them up," I said. "Make her think she is winning. Make her think she has hit a gold mine. I want her confident. I want her drunk on money. Because when people are drunk, they make mistakes." The auction began. Mr. Sneed started his chant, a rapid-fire rhythmic patter that turned my life into commerce. Lot number 1, a Victorian mahogany dining set, 12 chairs, hand-carved. "Do I hear 2,000? 2,000, a dealer shouted. 2,500, Kenji said, raising his paddle. He was wearing sunglasses and a dark suit, looking every inch the mysterious international buyer. 3,000, the dealer countered. 5,000, Kenji said without hesitating. The room went quiet. 5,000 was double the market value. Shelby's head snapped toward Kenji. Her eyes widened. She grabbed Dante's arm, whispering something frantically. She was doing the math. She was counting the commission. Sold to number 42, Sneed banged his gavel. It went on like that for an hour. The Persian rugs, Persian. The oil paintings, the antique clock, Kenji bought them all. He bid aggressively, knocking out the competition with prices that made the neighbors gasp. Shelby was vibrating. She was practically dancing. She kept refilling her glass, her smile getting wider and wider. She thought she had found a fool. She thought she was stripping the house of junk and getting paid a fortune for it. She didn't know that the money she was receiving was my money, recycled through a shell company, and that the items were simply going into storage until I reclaimed my house. She was selling my own property back to me, and she was celebrating the theft. Then came the main event. Lot number 45, Sneed announced. A vintage Steinway Model B grand piano, ebony finish, circa 1958. My heart stopped. The piano. It sat in the corner of the living room, a massive black beast that had been the center of my world for 40 years. I had bought it with my first big royalty check. I had written Midnight Train on those keys. I had composed the entire Soul of the City symphony on that bench. Bernice used to sit on top of it while I played, singing softly in my ear. It wasn't just an instrument, it was a church. I watched Dante. He looked at the piano. He touched the keys gently. He remembered. He remembered sitting on my lap while I taught him the C major scale. He remembered the Christmas carols. "Don't sell it, Dante," I whispered to the screen. "Stop her. Save one thing." But Shelby slapped his hand away. "Don't touch it," she hissed loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "You will get fingerprints on the finish. This guy is paying top dollar for mint condition." She looked at Kenji. She smiled a predatory smile. "This is a very special piece," she announced to the room, taking the microphone from Sneed. "My father-in-law, he fancied himself a musician. He spent hours banging away on this thing. It is very sentimental. But we have to let it go. To pay for his care, you understand. Fancied myself a musician." The insult burned. I was TK Legend. I had gold records in the wall behind the plaster. "Start the bidding at 10,000, Sneed said. 15, Kenji said immediately. 20, a collector in the front row shouted. 30, Kenji countered. 40, the collector said. This was a Steinway. It was valuable even without the history. $50,000, Kenji said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. The crowd murmured. 50,000. It was a staggering sum for a used piano in need of tuning. Shelby's eyes were saucer-wide. She was doing the math again. $50,000. That was enough to pay off the immediate interest on the loan sharks. That was enough to buy a new wardrobe. 60,000, the collector said, sweating. $100,000, Kenji said. Silence. Absolute total silence. Sneed dropped his gavel. He looked at Kenji as if he were an alien. 100,000 going once he stammered. Shelby stepped forward. She held up her hand. Wait, she said. Her voice was sharp, suspicious. She looked at Kenji. She looked at the piano. She looked back at Kenji. $100,000, she repeated slowly. For an old piano. It is a classic, ma'am, Kenji said smoothly. My client collects them. Shelby narrowed her eyes. The paranoia I had planted, the seeds of insanity I had sown were blooming. She remembered my confused ramblings about money in the walls. She remembered the empty safe. She remembered me saying I hid the treasure where the music plays. I hadn't said that. But in her greedy, twisted mind, she filled in the blanks. She thought about the price. Why would a stranger pay $100,000 unless it was worth more, unless there was something inside it? She looked at the piano. She looked at the heavy wooden legs. She looked at the soundboard. He hid it, she whispered. I saw her lips move. He hid the money into the piano. She grabbed the microphone from Sneed. The item is withdrawn, she shouted. The room erupted in protests. You can't withdraw it, Sneed argued. We have a bid. It is my house, Shelby screamed. It is my piano, and I say it is not for sale. She ran to the fireplace. She grabbed the heavy iron poker from the hearth. Shelby, no, Dante yelled, realizing what she was doing. She didn't listen. She ran back to the piano. She looked deranged. The greed had consumed her completely. She believed there were diamonds or gold bars or stacks of cash hidden inside the instrument. She believed I was mocking her from the nursing home, hiding my fortune in the one place she hadn't looked. She raised the poker. Get back, she screamed at the crowd, swinging the iron bar. Get back! She brought the poker down on the lid of the Steinway. Crack! The sound was like a gunshot. The beautiful black lacquer splintered. The wood groaned. I flinched in my chair. It felt like she had hit me. She hit it again and again. She was screaming inarticulate sounds of rage and avarice. She smashed the music stand. She smashed the fallboard. She exposed the keys, the ivory keys I had touched for 40 years. She jammed the poker into the action. Twang! The strings snapped. The sound was a discordant shriek, a dying scream of metal and tension. It was the sound of music dying. She ripped at the wood, tearing it apart with her bare hands, breaking her nails, bleeding onto the keys. Where is it? She screamed. Where is the money? She stuck her hand inside the broken body of the piano, feeling around the soundboard, searching for a false bottom, searching for a bag of cash. There was nothing. Just wood, just felt, just cast iron and wire. She destroyed it. She reduced a masterpiece to kindling in front of a room full of horrified witnesses. Dante stood there, tears streaming down his face. He didn't try to stop her. He just watched his inheritance turn into splinters. She stopped finally. She was panting, her chest heaving. She looked into the hollowed-out ruin of the piano. It is empty, she whispered. She looked up at the crowd. She looked at Kenji. He tricked me, she sobbed. He tricked me again. Mr. Sneed stepped forward. He looked at the destroyed instrument. Ma'am, he said, his voice cold. You just destroyed a lot worth $100,000. And per our contract, you still owe the auction house the commission on the final bid. That will be $20,000, payable immediately. Shelby dropped the poker. It clattered onto the floor. She looked at the ruin she had made. She realized what she had done. She had destroyed the most valuable thing in the room because she thought she deserved more. I turned off the monitor. I couldn't watch anymore. I sat in the silence of the office. I felt a deep, profound grief. That piano was my friend. It was my partner. But as the grief faded, a cold resolve took its place. She had destroyed the piano, but she hadn't found the music. The masters were safe in the storage unit. The legacy was safe. She had just proven to a room full of witnesses that she was unstable. She had proven that she was violent, destructive, and paranoid. She had just handed me the evidence I needed to prove that she was the one who needed a guardian, not me. I picked up my phone. I called Sal. Did you see it? I asked. I saw it, Thad. Sal said, his voice thick with anger. She is an animal. She is a fool, I said. Sal, I need you to do something. Anything. Call the police, I said. Report a disturbance. Report a destruction of property. But don't press charges yet. Just get it on the record. I want a paper trail. Done. And Sal. Yeah. Find me a piano restorer, I said. The best in the world. I don't care what it costs. I want the pieces collected. I want them saved. You think it can be fixed? Anything can be fixed, Sal, I said. If you have enough patience and enough money. I hung up. I stood up and walked to the window. Shelby thought she had broken me by breaking my piano. She thought she had won a victory by destroying my heart. She didn't know that she had just signed her own warrant. She had the cash from the other items. She had the money from the rugs and the paintings. She thought she was rich. She was going to use that money to pay the bribe. She was going to use it to pay the notary to fake the deed transfer on the house. She was digging deeper. And I was going to let her. I was going to let her spend every dime she made from selling my life on a crime that would send her to prison. I walked out of the office. The music was gone. But the war was just entering its crescendo, and I was about to conduct the finale. The ink on a forgery never dries quite right. It always looks a little too wet, a little too shiny, like the sweat on a guilty man's upper lip. I sat in my command center, which was really just the back office of Sal's dealership, surrounded by monitors, watching my son commit a felony in high definition. The camera I had hidden in the chandelier of the dining room gave me a perfect view of the table where Dante was trying to become me. He had a sheet of tracing paper over one of my old contracts, and he was moving his hand with the jerky hesitation of a child learning to write. He was trying to copy the signature of Thaddeus Moore. "Do it faster," Shelby hissed. She was pacing behind him, her heels clicking a nervous rhythm on the hardwood. "You have to make it look natural, Dante. If you hesitate, it looks fake." "I can't help it." Dante snapped his hand, cramping. "His signature is weird. He has that loop on the T. I can't get the loop right." "Just do it," she screamed. "The notary is going to be here in 20 minutes. If we don't have the signature ready before he gets here, we can't sell the house. And if we don't sell the house, the loan sharks take my knees." I watched my son take a deep breath and press the pen down. He signed my name. He stole my identity. It wasn't just ink on paper. It was the final severance of the bond between us. He was no longer just a disappointed son, he was a criminal. And he was doing it for a woman who would sell him for a pair of shoes. I picked up my burner phone and sent a text to the man waiting in a car down the street. "You are up." The man was an actor I knew from the old days, a guy named Marcus, who used to play tough guys in B-movies. I had hired him to play the role of Mr. Sterling, a corrupt notary with a flexible moral compass. He looked the part. He wore a suit that was expensive but slightly ill-fitting, and he carried a briefcase that looked like it held secrets. I watched on the monitor as the doorbell rang. Dante jumped like he had been shot. He quickly hid the tracing paper under a magazine and tried to smooth out his expression. Shelby ran to the door, fixing her hair, forcing a smile that looked like a rictus of pain. "Mr. Sterling," she cooed, opening the door. "Thank you so much for coming on such short notice. We are in such a rush." Sterling walked in. He didn't smile. He looked around the foyer with a sneer of appraisal. "I am here for the signature," he said, his voice gravelly. "Where is Mr. Moore?" "He is resting." Shelby lied smoothly. "He signed the papers earlier this morning before he took his medication. He has a condition, you know. We didn't want to wake him up just for a stamp." Sterling walked into the dining room. He looked at Dante. He looked at the document on the table. The deed to my house. The house I built. The house they were selling for $5 million to a blind buyer, a buyer that was actually a holding company I owned. They thought they were selling my house to a stranger. They were actually selling my house back to me, using my own money to pay a bribe I had orchestrated. It was a circle of stupidity so perfect it was almost art. Sterling picked up the paper. He pulled a jeweler's loop from his pocket and inspected the signature. He took his time. He let the silence stretch until Dante was sweating through his shirt. "This is a forgery," Sterling said flatly. The air left the room. Dante turned gray. Shelby stopped smiling. What do you mean?" Shelby stammered. "That is his signature. I saw him sign it." Sterling dropped the paper on the table. "Lady, I have been notarizing documents for 30 years. I know ink flow. I know pressure points. This was signed by a shaking hand trying to copy a static image, and the ink is still wet. If he signed it this morning, it would be dry." He started to pack up his bag. "I am leaving, and I am calling the district attorney. Fraud is a felony. Attempting to sell a property with a forged deed is 5 to 10 years. Have a nice day." He turned to walk away. "Wait!" Shelby screamed. She threw herself in front of him, blocking his path. "Wait! Please! You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Sterling said. "You are broke. The old man is senile, but he won't sign. So you got creative. I don't care about your sob story. I care about my license. He tried to step around her. "How much?" Shelby whispered. Sterling stopped. He looked at her. A slow, greedy smile spread across his face. It was exactly the expression I had told him to use. "Excuse me?" he asked. "How much to stamp it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How much to look the other way? How much to say you saw him sign it?" Sterling laughed. He walked back to the table and leaned on it. "You are asking me to commit a crime, Mrs. Moore. That is expensive. That is high risk. We are selling the house for $5 million, Shelby said. "We will have money. We can pay you 10,000. Sterling scoffed. 10,000. "I wouldn't get out of bed for 10,000. 20. Dante offered, his voice weak. 50, Sterling said. $50,000. Cash. Now. 50. Shelby choked. "We don't have $50,000 cash. If we had cash, we wouldn't be selling the house in a panic." "Then I guess you don't have a deal," Sterling said, picking up his bag again. "And since I am a mandatory reporter, I guess I have to make a call." He pulled out his phone. "Stop!" Shelby yelled. "Stop! Just give us a minute." She grabbed Dante and dragged him into the kitchen. I switched camera feeds. "What do we do?" Dante hissed. "We don't have 50 grand. The accounts are frozen. The credit cards are dead. We have the jewelry," Shelby said. Her eyes were wild. "What jewelry?" Dante asked. "My wedding ring," Shelby said. "The diamond earrings, the necklace your mother gave me, and your watch, the Rolex." "No," Dante said, clutching his wrist. "Not the Rolex. Dad gave me that for graduation." "Do you want to go to jail?" Shelby screamed, slapping his chest. "Do you want to go to prison for forgery? Because that man out there is going to send us up the river if we don't pay him. The house sale is $5 million, Dante. $5 million. Once we get that check, we can buy 10 Rolexes. We can buy a bucket of diamonds, but we need that stamp." She didn't wait for him to agree. She started pulling rings off her fingers. She ripped the necklace from her throat. She grabbed Dante's wrist and unclasped the watch. She ran out of the room. I watched from my office, my heart cold. That necklace wasn't just gold. It was the first gift I ever gave Bernice. I had given it to Shelby on her wedding day, hoping she would understand the legacy she was marrying into. Now she was treating it like currency in a drug deal. She ran back into the dining room and dumped the pile of gold and diamonds onto the table in front of Sterling. "There," she said, breathing hard. "That is a 3-carat diamond. That is a vintage Rolex. The necklace is solid gold. That is easily $60,000 worth of jewelry. Take it. Just stamp the paper." Sterling looked at the pile. He picked up the watch. He weighed it in his hand. He looked at the ring. He looked at me through the hidden camera lens, though he didn't know it. He gave a microscopic nod. "Fine," he said. He swept the jewelry into his briefcase. My wife's necklace. My son's graduation watch. Gone. He took out his stamp. He pressed it into the ink pad. Thump. He pressed it onto the forged deed. Thump. He signed his name. "There," he said. "It is official. As far as the state of Washington is concerned, Thaddeus Moore signed this document in my presence while of sound mind and body." He handed the deed to Shelby. "Pleasure doing business with you," he said. "Don't call me again." He walked out. Shelby held the paper. She hugged it to her chest. She looked at Dante and they both started laughing. It was the hysterical laughter of people who have just survived a firing squad. "We did it," Dante gasped. "We actually did it. We are rich," Shelby screamed. $5 million. The buyer wires the money as soon as he gets this deed. We just have to courier it to his lawyer." She looked around the room. "We need to pack," she said. "We need to be out of here before the money hits. We don't want to be here when Thad comes back from the nursing home. If he ever comes back." She didn't care about the jewelry. She didn't care about the forgery. She only saw the finish line. I sat in my chair and watched them celebrate. They were high-fiving. They were popping another bottle of my champagne. They thought they had just bought their freedom. They didn't know they had just sold the last things of value they owned to pay a man I had hired to witness their crime. Sterling Marcus, the actor, was bringing the jewelry to me. I would have it back in an hour. I hadn't lost a dime. But they had lost everything. And the buyer. The mysterious Apex Capital that was buying the house for $5 million. That was me too. I was buying my own house with my own money. The wire transfer they were waiting for was real. But it wasn't going to their account. The contract they hadn't read, the one they forged my signature on, had a clause. A clause buried in the fine print on page 42, proceeds of sale to be deposited into the Moore Family Preservation Trust account number ending in 0098. Account 0098 was a blocked escrow account. The money would go in, and it would freeze. They wouldn't be able to touch a cent without the signature of the trustee. And the trustee was me. I watched them dancing in the living room. "Dance, son," I whispered. "Dance while the music is still playing, because the silence is coming, and it is going to be deafening." I picked up my phone and called Sal. "It is done," I said. "The deed is signed. The jewelry is secured." "Did they take the bait?" Sal asked. "Hook, line, and sinker." "They think they are millionaires, Sal. They are about to go on a spending spree." "Let them," Sal said. "It will just make the fall harder." "Exactly," I said. I hung up. I looked at the monitor one last time. Dante was holding Shelby, looking at the empty spot on his wrist where his watch used to be. He looked sad for a second, but then Shelby kissed him and whispered something in his ear, probably about the Ferrari they were going to buy, and he smiled. He chose the fantasy over the father. Again. I turned off the screen. I had the car, I had the masters, I had the jewelry, and now I had the proof of felony fraud. I had everything I needed to bury them, but I wasn't going to do it yet. I was going to let them have their party. I was going to let them invite their friends. I was going to let them stand in the middle of my house and brag about how smart they were. And then I was going to walk in. I stood up and smoothed my flannel shirt. It was time to get a suit pressed. A real suit, the kind TK Legend used to wear when he owned the room. The mechanic was retiring. The Legend was coming back for one last show. The bass from the speakers was so loud it rattled the windows of the Rolls-Royce parked at the bottom of the driveway. I sat in the back seat watching my house vibrate. It was 9 o'clock at night, but the mansion was lit up like a landing strip in Vegas. Shelby had wasted no time. The ink on the fraudulent deed was barely dry. The wire transfer hadn't even cleared the escrow account I controlled, and she was already throwing a victory lap. She called it a housewarming party. I called it a crime scene. I adjusted the cuffs of my jacket. I wasn't wearing the flannel shirt or the grease-stained work pants tonight. I was wearing a bespoke Brioni suit, charcoal gray cut to fit my shoulders perfectly. I wore a vintage Patek Philippe watch on my wrist, a timepiece that cost more than the down payment on Dante's first apartment. I looked like TK. Legend, the man who had produced gold records and made millionaires out of kids from the street. I looked like the man who owned the ground these fools were dancing on. Beside me sat Sheriff Miller. He was in his dress uniform, his badge gleaming under the streetlights. On my other side was Marcus Sterling, the district attorney, a man who owed his election campaign funding to a quiet donation from the Moore Family Trust. "Are you ready?" Thad Miller asked, his voice low. I looked up at the house. I saw shadows dancing in the windows. I saw flashes of cameras. I saw the desecration of the sanctuary Bernice and I had built. "I am ready," I said. "Let us go shut it down." We got out of the car. The air was cool, carrying the scent of expensive cologne and cheap ambition. We walked up the driveway. There were cars parked everywhere, Lamborghinis rented for the night, Porsches leased by people who couldn't afford the gas. It was a parade of insecurity. A bouncer stood at the front door holding a clipboard. He was a big kid, probably a college student trying to look tough. He stepped in front of us, his hand raised. "Name," he asked, looking me up and down. He paused when he saw the sheriff. He paused longer when he saw the DA. But he looked confused when he looked at me. He didn't recognize the face of the man who paid the property taxes. "Private event," he stammered. "Unless you are on the list." "I don't need a list, son," I said. My voice was smooth, deep, a baritone that commanded attention without shouting. "I own the door." I walked past him. He didn't try to stop me. He stepped aside instinctively, sensing the gravity of the situation. We walked into the foyer. The noise hit me like a physical blow. Electronic dance music was blasting at a volume that shook the floorboards. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of spilled vodka. My house was filled with strangers. Hundreds of them. They were young, beautiful, and hollow. They were influencers, wannabe models, and hangers on the court of Queen Shelby. They were sitting on my antique furniture with their shoes on. They were smoking in the hallway where Bernice used to hang her quilts. A girl in a sequined dress was standing on the dining room table taking a selfie with a bottle of my vintage wine. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me. But I pushed it down. I channeled it into ice. I walked through the crowd. Miller and Sterling flanked me like bodyguards. People moved out of our way. They stopped dancing. They lowered their phones. They sensed the predator in the room. We made our way to the living room. The furniture had been pushed against the walls to make a dance floor. A DJ booth was set up in front of the fireplace. And there she was. Shelby stood on a raised platform near the DJ holding a microphone. She was wearing a gold dress that sparkled under the strobe lights. She looked triumphant. She looked drunk. Dante stood next to her holding a magnum of champagne, looking terrified and exhilarated at the same time. Shelby raised her glass. The music lowered slightly. "Listen up, everyone," she shouted into the mic, her voice shrill and slurred. "I want to propose a toast to us, to the new generation, to getting what we deserve." The crowd cheered. For years she continued enjoying the attention I had to deal with a dusty old house and a dusty old man. I had to listen to his boring stories about jazz and hard work. I had to pretend to respect a man who wore clothes from the thrift store. Laughter rippled through the room, but today she screamed, "We are free. We sold this mausoleum. We got $5 million coming our way in the morning. And the old man, he is rotting in a nursing home where he belongs. He is probably eating Jell-O and forgetting his own name right now." Dante laughed. It was a weak sound, but he laughed. He clinked his glass against hers. "To the future," Shelby yelled, "and to getting rid of the trash." She raised the bottle to her lips. I stepped forward. I walked up the 3 steps to the DJ booth. The DJ, a kid with headphones around his neck, looked at me. He saw the suit. He saw the eyes. "Cut it," I said. The DJ didn't argue. He hit the kill switch. The music died instantly. The silence that followed was deafening. It rushed into the room, filling the space where the bass had been. Shelby lowered the bottle. She turned around, annoyed. "Hey!" she shouted. "Who turned off the—" She saw me. The bottle slipped from her fingers. It hit the floor and didn't break. It just bounced, spilling foam across her gold shoes. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at me like she was seeing a ghost wearing a $5,000 suit. Dante choked on his drink. He coughed, sputtering champagne down his chin. He stared at me, his eyes bulging. "Dad," he whispered. I didn't look at him. I looked at Shelby. I walked past her to the DJ booth. I took the microphone from the stand. I looked out at the crowd. The influencers, the leeches, the fake friends. They were staring at me, confused, whispering, "Who is that? Is that the dad? He looks rich." I tapped the microphone. Thump, thump. The sound echoed through the house I built. "Good evening," I said. My voice was calm, resonant, the voice of a man who had recorded symphonies. "I apologize for interrupting the celebration," I continued. "I know you are all here to celebrate the sale of this house, to celebrate the wealth of my son and his charming wife, to celebrate the fact that the old man is finally gone." I looked at Shelby. She was shaking. She was backing away until she hit the wall. "But there seems to be a misunderstanding," I said. "You see, the old man isn't in a nursing home. And the house wasn't sold to a stranger." I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a piece of paper. It was the deed transfer, the one Shelby had forged. I held it up. "My daughter-in-law is a very enterprising woman," I said to the silent room. "She sold this house this morning. She forged a signature. She bribed a notary with stolen jewelry. She committed 3 felonies before lunch." A gasp went through the crowd. Phones went up. The live stream was happening, but this time I was the director. "But here is the punchline," I said, letting a small, cold smile touch my lips. "The company, she sold it to Apex Capital. I own it." Shelby let out a whimper. "I bought my own house," I said, "with my own money. The wire transfer you are waiting for, Shelby, it went into a frozen trust account. You don't have $5 million. You don't have $5. I turned to Dante. He was leaning against the DJ table, looking like he was going to faint. "And you, son," I said. "You stood there and laughed. You laughed when she called me trash. You laughed when she said I was rotting. You drank my champagne and toasted to my death." I walked over to him. I looked him in the eye. "You think I am a mechanic," I said. "You think I am a nobody. You never asked where the money came from. You never asked about the music." I gestured to the walls. "I am TK. Legend," I roared. The name hit the room like a bomb. TK Legend. The producer. The icon. The man whose name was on the vinyl records these kids sampled for their TikToks. "I built this empire on rhythm and blues," I said. "I built it on soul. And you have no soul. You sold your mother's car for a plane ticket. You sold your father for a party." I turned back to the crowd. "This party is over," I said. "This house is a crime scene, and everyone here is trespassing." Sheriff Miller stepped forward, his hand on his radio. "You heard the man," he shouted. "Clear out, now, unless you want to be booked as accessories to fraud." The stampede was instant. The influencers dropped their drinks and ran. The fake friends scrambled for the exits. The room emptied in seconds, leaving only the debris of their greed behind. Shelby slid down the wall. She was sitting on the floor in her gold dress, surrounded by spilled champagne. She looked up at me. "You set us up," she whispered. "You knew." "I watched you," I said, looking down at her. "I watched you steal. I watched you lie. I watched you convince a doctor I was crazy. I gave you the rope, Shelby. I just waited for you to jump." The district attorney stepped forward. "Shelby Moore," Marcus Sterling said, opening a folder. "You are under arrest for forgery, grand larceny, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Shelby screamed. It was a raw, ugly sound. "No, you can't. I am rich. I sold the house. You sold nothing. I said, you just bought yourself a cell." Two deputies moved in. They pulled her up. They cuffed her hands behind her back. She thrashed, she spit, she cursed. But the cuffs held. Dante stood there alone. He looked at his wife being dragged away. Then he looked at me. "Dad," he said, his voice trembling. "I didn't know. She told me, she said it was legal. She said it was—" I looked at my son. I saw the boy I had raised. I saw the man he had failed to become. "You knew, Dante," I said. "You knew it was wrong, but you wanted the money more than you wanted your father." The deputies came for him next. "Dante Moore, you are under arrest for conspiracy and fraud." They cuffed him. He didn't fight, he just cried. Soft, pathetic sobs. I watched them go. I watched the lights of the police cars flash through the window. The house was quiet again. The bass was gone. The laughter was gone. I walked back to the DJ booth. The equipment was still on. I plugged in my phone. I selected a track. It was a song I had written for Bernice 40 years ago. A slow, soulful ballad about storms and shelter. I pressed play. The music filled the room, washing over the broken glass and the stained rugs. It was pure. It was clean. I stood there, in the center of my home, listening to the voice of my past. "Welcome to your farewell party," I whispered to the empty room. I walked to the window. I watched the police cars drive away, taking my son and his wife to a place where money couldn't save them. I felt a tear run down my face. It was hot and salty. I wiped it away. I had my house. I had my music. I had my dignity. And tomorrow, I was going to get my car back. The legend was back, and he was playing a solo. The silence that filled the cavernous living room of my estate was heavier than the bass that had been shaking the floorboards just moments before. The influencers, the hangers-on, and the social climbers stood frozen, their phones still raised, recording a moment they didn't quite understand yet. They looked from me to Shelby, then back to me, trying to reconcile the image of the man in the $5,000 suit with the story of the senile mechanic they had been fed. Shelby was pressed against the wall, her chest heaving. She looked like a cornered animal. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a lawyer, looking for anyone who would buy the lies she was selling. But the market had crashed. Dante stood by the DJ booth, his face the color of old ash. He stared at me with a mixture of terror and awe. He had never looked at me like that before. He had always looked down. Now he was forced to look up. "You think I am a mechanic, Dante?" I said, my voice filling the room without the need for a microphone. "You think I spent 40 years washing grease off my hands just to pay your rent? You never asked. You never wondered where the money for your college came from. You never wondered how a man who fixes carburetors could buy a block in downtown Seattle." I walked over to the laptop connected to the massive projection screen Shelby had set up to display photos of herself. I tapped the keyboard. The screen flickered. "I am not just a mechanic," I said. "I am a producer. I am a creator." I clicked a folder. A list of songs scrolled across the screen. Midnight Train, Soul of the City, Rhythm in the Rain. The crowd gasped. A young DJ near the front dropped his headphones. "No way," he whispered. "Those are TK Legend tracks." I looked at the kid. I nodded. "I am TK Legend," I said. The name hit the room like a physical wave. TK Legend was a ghost, a myth. The man who had defined the sound of 70s soul and 80s jazz. The man who owned the publishing rights to the songs that half the people in this room had danced to at their weddings. The man who had vanished in 1982 because he chose his family over the fame. I saw the realization hit Dante. He staggered back, gripping the edge of the booth. "You," he whispered. "Mom used to play those records. You wrote them." "I wrote them," I said. "I produced them, and I own them, every single note, every single royalty check. That is the empire you tried to steal, son. That is the legacy you sold for a plane ticket." Shelby shook her head violently. "No," she screamed. "That is a lie. You are lying. You are just a sad old man. You don't have $50 million. You count coupons. You drive a truck." I looked at her. I looked at the gold dress she wore, a dress bought with credit I had extended. "I drive a truck because I like trucks, Shelby," I said. "I count coupons because I know the value of $1. Something you never learned." I turned back to the laptop. "But I didn't come here to talk about my discography," I said. "I came here to show you a movie. A home movie." I clicked the file labeled Dining Room, 10 a.m. The projection screen changed. The list of songs disappeared, replaced by a high-definition video feed. It was the dining room of this very house from this very morning. The crowd watched in stunned silence. On the screen, Shelby was pacing. Dante was sitting at the table, shaking. The actor I had hired, Marcus, sat across from them, playing the corrupt notary. The audio was crystal clear. "How much to stamp it?" Shelby's voice rang out from the speakers, shrill and desperate. "How much to look the other way? How much to say you saw him sign it?" The guests in the room shifted uncomfortably. Phones were recording the screen, now broadcasting the crime to the world. $50,000, the notary said on the screen. "We don't have $50,000 cash." Shelby's recorded voice screamed, "Take the jewelry, my wedding ring, the necklace your mother gave me, and your watch, the Rolex." I watched real-time Shelby slide down the wall, covering her ears. "No," she moaned. "Turn it off." But I didn't turn it off. I let it play. I let them see her strip the jewelry off her body. I let them see Dante surrender his watch. I let them see the notary stamp the document. There the notary said on screen, "It is official. As far as the state of Washington is concerned, Thaddeus Moore signed this document in my presence." I paused the video on the frame where Shelby was holding the forged deed, a look of pure avarice on her face. The room was silent enough to hear a heartbreak. I turned to face them. "You didn't sell this house," I said, my voice cold as the grave. "You sold your freedom. You forged my signature. You bribed a notary. And you did it all on camera in a house you didn't own." Shelby stood up. She pushed herself off the wall. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure hate. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You are a fraud," she shrieked. "You are the criminal. You tricked us. You pretended to be poor. You led us into this." I took a step toward her. "I never said I was poor, Shelby," I said. "I said I lived simply." I looked around the room at the people in their expensive clothes, the people who judged worth by the label on a jacket. "Only a parasite confuses simplicity with poverty," I said. The words hung in the air. Parasite. It was the only word that fit. Shelby lunged. She lost all control. The veneer of the socialite cracked and the street fighter came out. She ran at me, her nails curved like claws, screaming obscenities. "You ruined me," she yelled. "You old bastard, you ruined everything." She didn't get within 3 feet of me. Sheriff Miller stepped in. He didn't use force, he just used presence. He caught her arm in midair. "That is enough." "Mrs. Moore," he said, his voice heavy with authority. "Let go of me," she screamed, thrashing against his grip. "Arrest him. He is the one lying. He is the one hiding money." Miller spun her around. He pulled her arms behind her back. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut cut through the room. "Shelby Moore," Miller said, "you are under arrest for forgery, grand larceny, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent." "I suggest you use it," I added. Shelby stopped thrashing. She looked at the cuffs. She looked at the crowd recording her. She looked at me. "Dante," she whimpered. "Dante, help me." I looked at my son. He was still standing by the DJ booth. He looked at his wife in handcuffs. He looked at his father, the legend. He looked at the screen where his crime was frozen in pixels. He didn't move to help her. He couldn't. The district attorney, Marcus Sterling, stepped forward. He motioned to 2 deputies who had entered the room. "Mr. Moore," Sterling said to Dante. Dante looked up. "Me. Yes, you, son. You signed the paper too. You handed over the watch. You are a co-conspirator." Dante started to cry. It was a soft, pathetic sound. "Dad," he said, looking at me. "Dad, please." I didn't want to. She made me. I looked at him. I saw the boy I had raised. I saw the man who had sold my wife's car. I saw the coward who had let his wife call me a leech. "She didn't make you do anything, Dante," I said. "You are a grown man. You made a choice. You chose the easy way. You chose the lie." The deputies moved in. They took Dante's arms. They cuffed him. He didn't fight. He slumped his body, going limp with resignation. I walked over to him. I stood in front of him. "I built a world for you," I said softly so only he could hear. "I built a kingdom. All you had to do was be a decent man. All you had to do was wait. But you couldn't wait. You had to steal it." "I am sorry," he sobbed. "Dad, I am so sorry." "I know," I said. "And that is the tragedy. You are sorry you got caught. You aren't sorry you did it." I signaled the deputies. "Take them away." They marched them out. Shelby was screaming again, cursing my name, cursing the police, cursing the world. Dante walked in silence. His head hung low, his expensive shoes dragging on the floor. The crowd parted to let them pass. No one said a word. The party was over. The hangover had begun. I stood in the center of the room alone in the spotlight. I looked at the DJ. "Play it," I said. "Play what?" the kid asked, terrified. "Track 4, I said, "The Long Goodbye." The DJ scrambled to find the track on my laptop. He pressed play. The sound of a lone saxophone filled the room, melancholy, deep, soulful. It was a song I wrote in 1980 when my father died. It was a song about letting go. I walked to the window. I watched the police cars flash their lights in the driveway. I watched them load my son and his wife into the back seats. I watched them drive away into the night. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Sal Russo. He had come in with the police. "You okay, Thad?" he asked. "I don't know, Sal," I said. "I just sent my son to prison." "You saved him," Sal said. "If he had gotten away with this, he would have lost his soul completely. At least now he has a chance to find it again, even if he has to look for it in a cell." I nodded. "Maybe." I looked around the room at the guests who were quietly shuffling toward the door. "Get everyone out, Sal," I said. "I want my house back." I walked to the fireplace. I picked up the broken photo of Bernice. I wiped a smudge of dirt off the glass. "We did it, baby," I whispered. "The car is safe, the music is safe, and the house is clean." I sat down in my armchair, the one Shelby had tried to sell. I listened to my own music play. I was TK Legend. I was a millionaire. I was a victor. But as the music faded and the house fell silent, I just felt like an old man who missed his wife. But I still had work to do. I had a piano to fix. I had a car to drive. And I had a lesson to finish. I closed my eyes and waited for the dawn. The nightmare was over. Now I just had to wake up. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting tight is usually the loudest thing in a quiet room, but not tonight. Tonight the loudest thing was the silence that followed the chaos. The deputies were finishing the paperwork, their radios crackling with static. Shelby was pressed against the hood of a patrol car, her face smeared with tears and mascara, her gold dress ripped at the hem. She had stopped screaming. Now she was just staring at the ground, calculating the years she had just thrown away. Dante stood a few feet away, his hands bound behind his back, his head hanging so low his chin touched his chest. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a dream to find himself in a nightmare. I stood on the steps of my home, adjusting my cuffs. I felt a strange calmness. It was the calm of a producer after the final mix is locked. The work was done. The track was finished. But there was one more instrument to add to the arrangement. One final solo. A low rumble started in the distance. It wasn't the sirens. It was deeper, throatier. It was a sound I knew better than the beat of my own heart. It grew louder, vibrating in the air, shaking the leaves on the oak trees. The deputies looked up, hands drifting to their holsters. Shelby lifted her head. Dante frowned, confused by a sound that tickled a memory he had tried to suppress. Twin beams of light cut through the darkness of the driveway, blindingly bright. The engine roared, a beautiful, guttural symphony of American horsepower. The car rolled into the light. It was the Impala. But it wasn't just a car. It was a time machine. It was jade green, polished to a mirror shine that reflected the flashing blue lights of the police cruisers. The chrome bumpers gleamed like sterling silver. The white wall tires were pristine. It moved with a heavy, graceful elegance, gliding over the gravel like a ship entering a harbor. Sal Russo was behind the wheel. He wore his mechanic's jumpsuit, but tonight he looked like a chauffeur driving a royal carriage. He brought the car to a stop right in front of Dante, right in front of the son who had treated this masterpiece like garbage. Sal killed the engine. The silence rushed back in, but now it was heavy with the presence of the machine. I walked down the steps. My Italian shoes crunched on the stones. I walked past the police. I walked past Shelby, who was staring at the car with her mouth open. She recognized it, but she had never seen it like this. When she saw it in the garage, she saw dust and old sheets. Now she saw money. She saw value. She didn't know what it was, but she could smell the worth of it. I walked up to the car. I ran my hand along the rear fender, feeling the cool metal. I remembered the day Bernice and I painted it. We did it in the garage with the doors open, listening to Sam Cooke on the radio. She had paint in her hair. She was laughing. I looked at Dante. He was staring at the car as if he were seeing a ghost. "Do you recognize it, son?" I asked, my voice soft but cutting. Dante swallowed hard. That is Mom's car." "It is," I said. "The junker, the rust bucket, the waste of space. Isn't that what you called it?" Dante didn't answer. He couldn't take his eyes off it. Sal got out of the driver's side. He handed me the keys. He didn't say a word. He just nodded and stepped back, joining the sheriff. He knew this was family business. I opened the trunk. The hinges moved silently, oiled to perfection. Inside the trunk, lined with the custom carpet Bernice had cut herself, sat a single leather briefcase. It wasn't the original hiding spot. I had moved the documents, but the symbolism remained. I opened the briefcase. Inside were copies. High-resolution color copies of the documents we had pulled from the door panel. Copyright registrations, royalty agreements, master recording ownership certificates, and a photocopy of a check from a streaming service for the last quarter. I took the papers out. I walked over to Dante. I stood right in front of him. He smelled of fear and stale champagne. "Look at this," I said, holding the papers up to his face. He squinted. The porch light illuminated the bold text. "TK Legend. Royalties. Rights reserved." "What is this?" he whispered. I turned the page, showing him the valuation report Sal and I had commissioned. Estimated value of master recordings and publishing rights, $50 million. Dante's knees buckled. The officer behind him had to grab his arm to keep him upright. He stared at the number. 5, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. 50 million, he choked out. I lowered the papers. I looked him in the eye. "Your mother spent 30 years restoring this car," I said. "Every stitch in those seats she did by hand. Every wire she helped me run. She loved this car, Dante, not because it was a machine, but because it was our vault. It was our safety deposit box. She hid the legacy of our family inside the doors, because she wanted to keep it safe for you." I pointed at the Impala. "She told me to give it to you when you were ready," I said. "She said, Thad, when he becomes a man, give him the keys. The music will take care of him." Tears started to stream down Dante's face. He was shaking his head back and forth, a pendulum of regret. "I didn't know," he sobbed. "I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't look," I said, my voice rising. "You looked at your mother's work and you saw trash. You looked at my life and you saw a failure. You saw an old car taking up space where you wanted to put a home gym." I took a step closer, invading his space. "You sold it for $15,000, I said. 15 grand. You sold a $50 million legacy for a plane ticket to Paris and a handbag. You sold your mother's love for scrap metal." Shelby made a noise, a high-pitched whimper. She was looking at the papers in my hand. She was doing the math. She realized what she had done. She had forced him to sell the winning lottery ticket. She had thrown away the kingdom. 50 million, she whispered. We could have had everything. You could have had nothing," I snapped, turning on her. "Because it wasn't yours. It was never yours. It was Bernice's. And she hid it from people exactly like you. I turned back to Dante. I bought it back, I said. I paid Sal double what he paid the flipper. I brought it home. Dante looked at the car. He looked at the seat where he used to sit as a boy pretending to drive. Dad, he cried. Please. I am sorry. I was stupid. I will fix it. You can't fix this, I said. You can't fix a betrayal this deep with an apology. You didn't just sell a car, Dante. You sold me. You sold us. You decided that a week of pretending to be rich was worth more than your family history. I walked back to the car. I threw the papers into the trunk and slammed it shut. The sound was final. It is mine now, I said. I keep the car. I keep the music. I keep the money. All of it. Dante slumped. The fight went out of him. The realization of what he had lost hit him with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't just going to jail. He was going to jail knowing that he had held the keys to the universe in his hand, and he had traded them for nothing. He fell to his knees. The pavement was cold and hard. He put his forehead against my shoes. He wept. Great heaving sobs that shook his body. It was the sound of a man whose soul had finally broken. Mom, he wailed. Mom, I am so sorry. I looked down at him. I felt a flicker of pity. He was my son, but he was also a stranger. The boy I raised wouldn't have done this. The boy I raised had died a long time ago, killed by greed and a woman in a gold dress. I stepped back, pulling my foot away from his head. Get up, I said. Don't kneel to me, kneel to God. He is the only one who can help you now. I signaled the deputies. Get them out of here, I said. They hauled Dante up. He was limp, a rag doll. They dragged him toward the squad car. He kept looking back at the Impala. He kept looking at the green ghost of his mistake. Shelby was screaming again, blaming him, blaming me, blaming the world. But no one was listening. I stood next to the car, my hand resting on the roof. I watched them go. Sal walked up next to me. He pulled a rag from his pocket and wiped a speck of dust off the hood. She looks good, Thad Sal said softly. She looks beautiful, I said. Bernice would have been heartbroken to see him like this, Sal said. I shook my head. No, Sal, I said. Bernice would have been the one to call the cops. She didn't raise a thief, and she didn't suffer fools. I looked at the empty driveway. The party was over. The guests were gone. My son was gone. I was alone. But I had the music. I had the truth. And I had the car. I got into the driver's seat of the Impala. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, a deep, powerful sound that vibrated in my chest. I turned on the radio. It wasn't a station. It was the tape deck. I pushed in the cassette that was sitting on the seat. My music filled the night. A saxophone solo, smooth and dark as obsidian. I closed my eyes and listened. The legend was back. The interrogation room at the precinct was a stark contrast to the gold leaf and crystal of my living room, but Shelby fit right in. She sat on the metal chair, her gold dress torn at the shoulder, her makeup running in dark rivulets down her cheeks. She wasn't the imperious queen of the gala anymore. She was a survivor, and survivors will do anything to stay afloat, even if it means drowning the person they swore to love. I stood behind the one-way glass watching her perform. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She was leaning forward, her hands clasped in a plea for mercy, her eyes wide and glistening with practiced tears. Detective Miller sat across from her, his face impassive, but I could see the tick in his jaw. He knew a liar when he heard one. It was Dante, she sobbed, her voice hitching perfectly. I didn't want to do it. I begged him not to. I told him that forging the deed was wrong. I told him that stealing the car was wrong. But he has a temper, detective. You don't know him. He gets so angry when he doesn't get his way. He threatened me. He said if I didn't help him get the money, he would hurt me. I clenched my fists. She was painting my son as a monster. Dante was weak. Dante was greedy. But he wasn't violent. He had never raised a hand to anyone in his life. He was the one who flinched when she yelled. He was the one who slept on the couch when she was in a mood. And now she was turning him into an abuser to save her own skin. I was just trying to protect Thad, she continued, wiping her nose with a tissue. Dante, he talked about accidents. He talked about how much easier it would be if the old man just went away. I went along with the fraud because I thought it was the only way to save Thad's life. I thought if Dante got the money, he would calm down. I was a hostage detective. I was a victim of a controlling husband. Detective Miller looked at the mirror. He saw me standing there. He saw the rage burning in my eyes. He stood up. "I have someone who would like to speak to you about that statement, Mrs. Moore," Miller said. Shelby looked up, hopeful. "My lawyer. Is my lawyer here?" Miller opened the door. I walked in. Shelby's face collapsed. The hope drained out of her like water from a broken vase, leaving behind a residue of pure terror. She pressed herself back against the chair, the metal legs scraping loudly against the concrete floor. "You," she whispered. "What are you doing here? You can't be in here. This is police business." I sat down in the chair Miller had vacated. I placed my hands on the table. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had lived in my house, who had eaten my food, who had spent my money. "Hello, Shelby," I said. My voice was calm, but it carried the weight of a judge's gavel. "I heard your story. It is very moving. Dante the monster. Dante the Ikagidio. Shelby the saint! It is the truth!" She hissed, her eyes darting to the door. "He made me do it. You don't know him, Thad. You don't know what he is like behind closed doors." "I know exactly what goes on behind closed doors, Shelby," I said, "because unlike you, I pay attention." I reached into the inside pocket of my Brioni suit. I pulled out my phone. "You say Dante forced you," I said. "You say you were trying to protect me." "Yes," she said, sitting up straighter, trying to regain her composure. "He is unstable. I was the only one keeping him in check." I tapped the screen. I placed the phone on the table between us. "Then explain this," I said. I pressed play. The audio was crisp. It was recorded from the hidden microphone in my study the day they plotted to send me to the nursing home. "We have to do something, babe," Shelby's voice filled the interrogation room, sharp and commanding. "We can't be homeless. We become his guardians. We make the decisions. We can sell this dusty old mausoleum. We can move him into a facility where he will be safe, where he can't hurt anyone." Shelby went pale. She stared at the phone as if it were a bomb. "But we don't have money to pay him." Dante's voice on the recording sounded hesitant, scared. "We will have money once we control the accounts," Shelby's voice replied, cold and calculating. "I know a doctor, Dr. Grimes. He is flexible. If we pay him enough, he will sign the evaluation." I let it play. I let her hear herself planning the bribe. I let her hear herself convincing my son to commit a felony. "Put him in a home," Dante asked. "A nice home," Shelby lied on the tape. "And we get the power of attorney. We get the money, Dante. We get it all." I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. "That doesn't sound like a hostage, Shelby," I said. "That sounds like the ringleader. That sounds like a woman who was willing to lock an old man in a warehouse to buy a new wardrobe." Shelby shook her head frantically. That is out of context. I was role-playing. I was trying to calm him down. You doctored that tape. You are a producer, right? You manipulated the audio. I didn't doctor anything I said, and neither did the forensic audio specialist at the district attorney's office. They have the raw files, Shelby. They have hours of you. They have you screaming at him for not forging my signature fast enough. They have you calling me a leech. They have you planning to spend the money before the body was even cold. I leaned forward. "You weren't protecting me," I said. "You were hunting me." Shelby's face twisted. The mask of the victim fell away. The hatred that had been simmering beneath the surface boiled over. "So what?" she spat. "So what if I did? You owed us. You sat on $50 million while we struggled. You drove that stupid truck and wore those stupid shirts while we were drowning in debt. You are selfish, Thad. You are a miser. You deserve to be locked away." I nodded slowly. "Maybe I am a miser," I said. "Or maybe I just don't like funding bad investments. And you? Shelby, you are a very bad investment." I pulled another document from my pocket. It wasn't a recording. It was a bank statement. But not mine. And not Dante's. It was hers. A private account she had opened under her maiden name 3 years ago. An account she thought was secret. "You talk about debt," I said, glancing at the paper. "You talk about struggling. But according to this, you have been spending $10,000 a month on something that isn't rent and isn't food." Shelby froze. Her eyes went to the paper. She recognized the logo. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "I own the bank, Shelby," I said. "I told you. I see everything." I slid the paper across the table. "Payments to a Mr. Jax Miller," I read. $5,000 on the 1st of the month. $5,000 on the 15th. Rent for an apartment in the Pearl District. Lease payments on a Porsche Cayman. Gym memberships. Protein shakes. I looked at her. Who is Jax Miller Shelby? Is he your financial advisor? Or is he the personal trainer at the gym you go to every morning while Dante is at work? Shelby turned a color I didn't know existed. It was a mix of gray and green. She couldn't speak. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Dante thought you were shopping, I said. He thought you were spending the money on clothes. He didn't know you were keeping a pet. He didn't know he was working himself into an early grave to pay for his wife's boyfriend. You know, she choked out. I have known for 6 months, I said. I have the photos, I have the texts, I have the receipts. I leaned back. And here's the best part, Shelby. That apartment you rented for him, the one you paid for with Dante's credit card, the lease is in your name. But the payments stopped yesterday. She stared at me. I cut off the card, I said. I cut off the cash. Jax got an eviction notice this morning. And guess what he did? Did he fight for you? Did he offer to pay? No. He called the landlord and told them he was just a guest. He packed his bags and left. He blocked your number, Shelby. I checked. Shelby let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. No, she wailed. Jax wouldn't do that. He loves me. We were going to go to Paris together after I left Dante. Paris, I said. Ah, so that is why you wanted the tickets. You weren't taking Dante. You were taking him. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. The truth was written all over her face. You destroyed everything, she screamed, slamming her fists on the table. You ruined my marriage. You ruined my life. You ruined my love. Your love was a transaction, I said, cold as ice. And the check bounced. I stood up. I picked up the recording. I picked up the bank statement. Dante is in the next room, I said. He is crying. He is blaming himself. He thinks he failed you. I am going to walk in there, and I am going to show him this. I am going to show him that the woman he destroyed his relationship with his father for was using his money to sleep with a gym rat. No, Shelby pleaded, reaching out to grab my sleeve. Don't tell him. Please, Thad. If you tell him he won't pay for my lawyer, he won't bail me out. I will be alone. You are already alone, I said, shaking her off. You have been alone since the moment you decided that people were just stepping stones. I turned to the door. You played a good game, Shelby, I said. But you forgot one thing. You forgot that the house always wins. And I am the house. Shelby stood up. The cuffs clattered against the table. Her eyes were wild manic. She looked at the door. She looked at me. She realized she had no moves left. She had no money. She had no husband. She had no lover. She had nothing but the cold reality of a prison sentence. She snapped. You old devil, she shrieked. I should have killed you myself. I should have put a pillow over your face while you slept. I should have burned that house down with you in it. She lunged. She didn't care about the police. She didn't care about the consequences. She just wanted to hurt me. She wanted to wipe the look of judgment off my face. She flew across the table, her nails aiming for my eyes, her teeth bared like a wolf. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. Detective Miller was faster. He had been waiting for this. He burst through the door before she could touch me. He tackled her in midair, slamming her onto the table. Get off me, she screamed, thrashing and kicking. I will kill him. I will kill all of you. Miller pinned her down. 2 deputies rushed in. They grabbed her arms. They pulled her off the table and threw her against the wall. Shelby Moore Miller shouted, You are assaulting a witness. You are adding years to your sentence. Calm down. I am going to kill you, Thad, she screamed, her face pressed against the concrete block wall. I will find you. I will take everything. I am TK. Legend's daughter-in-law. I am royalty. You can't do this to me. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had turned my son against me. You aren't royalty, Shelby, I said, my voice quiet but audible over her screams. You are a cover song, and nobody remembers the cover. I turned and walked out of the room. The heavy steel door slammed shut, cutting off her screams. I stood in the hallway. I adjusted my tie. I checked my watch. It was time to see Dante. It was time to break his heart so I could save his life. I walked down the hall toward his interrogation room. The folder with the bank statements felt heavy in my hand. It was the weight of the truth, and the truth, as they say, sets you free. But first, it hurts like hell. The heavy steel door of the county jail visitor room slammed shut behind me with a sound that felt like a guillotine dropping. The air inside was cold and smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat, a scent that coated the back of my throat. I sat on the metal stool, my hands folded on the stainless steel ledge, waiting for the guard to bring in prisoner number 8492. I didn't think of him as Dante anymore. Dante was the boy who used to sit on my shoulders at the jazz festival. This man was a stranger who had sold his mother's soul for a first-class seat. Through the thick reinforced glass, I saw the door on the other side open. A guard let him in. Dante looked terrible. The orange jumpsuit hung loosely on his frame. His expensive haircut was gone, replaced by a buzz cut, and his face was gray and unshaven. He walked with a shuffle, the chains around his ankles clinking rhythmically. He looked broken. He looked small. He sat down opposite me. He picked up the phone receiver, his hand trembling. I picked up mine. "Dad," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Oh God, Dad, thank you for coming. You have to get me out. It is a nightmare in here." I looked at him. I didn't see my son. I saw the man who had forged my signature. I saw the man who had watched his wife smash my piano. "I am not here to get you out, Dante," I said, my voice flat and devoid of warmth. Dante's eyes widened. "What? But you are my father. You have the money. Shelby said you have hundreds of millions. The bail is set at $2 million, Dad. That is nothing to you. It is pocket change. Just write the check, please. I will do anything. I will go to rehab. I will work at the warehouse. Just don't leave me here." I leaned forward. The glass was cold against my forehead. "I had the money, Dante," I said. "I had the $2 million cash sitting in my account this morning. I was going to bring it." Hope flared in his eyes. A desperate, pathetic hope. "So you have it?" he asked. "You are going to post it?" "No," I said. "I spent it." He blinked, confusion clouding his face. You spent $2 million. On what?" "I bought a piano," I said. Dante stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "A piano." "A Steinway Model B," I continued calmly. "Vintage, 1958, mint condition. It cost exactly $100,000. And then I donated the rest of the bail money, $1.9 million, to the music department of the inner city high school where your mother used to volunteer." You bought a piano," Dante stammered, "instead of your son." "I replaced what you broke," I said. "You and your wife destroyed the music in my house. I brought it back. That piano is sitting in my living room right now. It sounds beautiful, Dante. It sounds like justice." Dante slammed his fist against the ledge. "You are crazy!" he screamed, his face twisting into the ugly mask I had seen at the party. "You are a sick old man. You care more about wood and strings than your own flesh and blood. Mom would hate you for this. Mom would never let me rot in here." I went cold. He had invoked her name. He had tried to use Bernice as a shield. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a letter. It wasn't a legal document. It was a creamy envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with blue wax. It smelled faintly of lavender. I held it up to the glass. "Do you recognize this handwriting?" I asked. Dante stopped screaming. He looked at the envelope. He squinted. That is Mom's writing," he whispered. "It is," I said. "She wrote this 3 years ago, 2 weeks before the cancer took her voice. She gave it to me, and she made me promise not to open it unless a specific condition was met." "What condition?" Dante asked, his voice trembling. "If the Impala ever left the garage," I said. I opened the envelope. My hands were steady. I unfolded the paper. The ink was shaky, written by a hand that was losing its strength, but the words were clear. "Read it, Dante," I said, pressing the letter against the glass. "Read what your mother thought of you." Dante leaned in. His eyes scanned the page. I watched him read. I watched the color drain from his face until he looked like a ghost. "My dearest Thad, if you are reading this, my heart is broken even in heaven. I know you love our son. You see the boy he was, but I see the man he has become. I see the way he looks at our things, not with memories, but with price tags. I see the way Shelby whispers in his ear. I hid the masters in the car, not just to keep them safe from the world, but to keep them safe from him. I knew Thad. I knew that one day when we were gone, or when we were too old to fight him, he would try to sell it. He would look at 30 years of our love and see a quick payday." Dante was shaking, his tears dripping onto the metal ledge. He was reading the words of the woman he thought would always protect him. This is my final instruction to you, Thaddeus. If Dante sells the car, if he trades my hard work for a vacation or a watch or a woman, he is no longer our son. He has chosen his path. Do not save him. Do not bail him out. Do not let him destroy what we built. He has to fall, Thad. He has to hit the bottom. It is the only way he will ever learn to stand up. If you save him, you kill him. Let him go. I love you. Keep the music playing. Bernice. Dante pulled back from the glass as if he had been burned. He slid off the stool and fell to his knees on the dirty floor of the visitation booth. He was sobbing, great heaving sounds that echoed in the small space. She knew, he wailed. She knew I would do it. She knew, I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. She watched you, Dante. She saw you change. She saw you become a stranger. She hoped she was wrong. We both hoped. I kept that letter sealed for 3 years, praying I would never have to open it. I prayed you would walk into the garage and see the car and remember the weekends we spent fixing it. I prayed you would see your mother. I looked down at him, huddled on the floor. But you didn't see her, I said. You saw $15,000. You saw a ticket to Paris. You proved her right. Mom, Dante cried. Mom, I am sorry. It is too late for apologies, I said, folding the letter carefully and putting it back in my pocket. She is gone, and the son she loved is gone too. I stood up. I picked up my cane. I am not bailing you out, Dante, I said. You are going to stay in here. You are going to go to trial. And you are going to go to prison, not because I hate you, but because I love you enough to let you learn. Dante looked up. His face was a mess of snot and tears. Dad, please, he begged. I will die in here. Then you will die a man who paid his debts, I said, instead of living as a parasite. I turned to the door. Dad, Dante screamed, Don't leave me. I am scared. I looked back at him one last time. I know, I said. You should be. Reality is a scary place when you have been living in a fantasy for 30 years. I knocked on the door. The guard opened it. I walked out of the room. I heard Dante screaming my name, screaming for his mother, screaming for a second chance. But the door closed. The lock clicked. The silence returned. I walked down the long hallway of the jail. My footsteps echoed on the concrete. I felt lighter. The weight of the secret was gone. The weight of the doubt was gone. Bernice had been right. She was always right. I walked out into the parking lot. Sal Russo was waiting by my truck. He saw my face, and he knew. You gave it to him, Sal asked. I gave it to him, I said. How did he take it? He broke, I said. Sal nodded. Good. Sometimes you have to break a bone to reset it straight. I looked up at the sky. The clouds were parting. The sun was trying to break through. Let us go, Sal, I said. Where to? To the studio, I said. I have a song in my head, a sad song, but a true one. And I finally have the piano to play it on. The sold sign on the front lawn of my estate did not look like a victory flag. It looked like a tombstone marking the death of a life I had outgrown. I stood on the porch for the last time, watching the movers load the few pieces of furniture I had decided to keep into a small truck. They were not the expensive Italian sofas or the antique dining sets. Those had been sold at auction or donated to charity. I only kept the chair I sat in to read my morning paper, the small bedside table where Bernice used to keep her glasses, and the old record player that had spun the soundtrack of our lives. Everything else, everything that Shelby had touched or Dante had coveted, was gone. I walked through the empty rooms. The hardwood floors echoed with the sound of my boots. I looked at the spot where the piano used to sit before Shelby destroyed it. The floorboards were still scratched, a scar that would remind the new owners that this house had seen violence. I looked at the dining room where I had played the fool, where I had let them humiliate me so I could see the truth. The air in the house felt stale, recycled, heavy with the ghosts of greed and betrayal. I didn't feel sad leaving it. I felt lighter. I felt like a man who had just taken off a wet wool coat after walking in the rain for hours. I drove to the law office of Kenji Sato in downtown Seattle. The skyscraper was glass and steel piercing the gray sky. I took the elevator to the top floor. Kenji was waiting for me, his desk covered in documents. He stood up when I walked in, bowing slightly out of respect, not just for the client, but for the man. It is all set, Sir Kenji said. The sale of the house closed this morning. $5 million has been wired to the main account. And the valuation of the master recordings? He paused, looking at the number on the spreadsheet. It is significant, sir. We have offers from 3 major labels to license the catalog. The initial advance is $50 million with residual royalties projected at $5 million a year. $50 million. It was a number that would have made the young Thad Moore faint. It was a number that had driven my son insane. But looking at it now on a piece of paper, it just looked like ink. It couldn't buy back the years. It couldn't buy back my wife. I don't want it, Kenji, I said, sitting down. Kenji blinked. Sir, I don't want the money, I said. I have my pension. I have my savings. I have enough to eat and enough to put gas in the truck. I don't need $50 million to die comfortably. What do you want to do with it? I want to give it back, I said. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an old photograph. It was a picture of a jazz band I had produced in 1975. The trumpet player, Big Al, was a genius. He could make a horn cry. He died in a cold water flat in Detroit, freezing to death because he couldn't pay his heating bill. The industry had chewed him up and spit him out. I want to start a foundation, I said. The Bernice Moore Foundation for the Arts. I want this money to go to them, Kenji, the old musicians, the backup singers, the session players who helped build the sound of this country but ended up with nothing. I want to pay their medical bills. I want to pay their rent. I want to make sure that no one who gave their soul to the music has to die alone in the cold. Kenji smiled. It was a genuine smile. That is a beautiful legacy, sir. It is Bernice's legacy, I said. She loved the music more than I did. She was the one who fed the band when they were broke. She was the one who sewed their buttons before a show. This is for her. We spent the next 3 hours outlining the bylaws. I made sure there were ironclad clauses. No family members could sit on the board. No administrative bloat. The money had to go to the people, not the bureaucracy. I signed the papers with a steady hand. With one stroke of a pen, I gave away a fortune. And with every loop of the ink, I felt another chain fall away. When I left the office, it was late afternoon. The rain had stopped and the sun was trying to break through the clouds. I didn't go to a hotel. I went to the storage unit. I opened the door and turned on the lights. The Impala sat there glowing under the fluorescent bulbs. The jade green paint was deep and lustrous. The chrome smiled at me. It was the only thing I had kept. It was the only thing that mattered. I walked around it, running my hand along the fins. I opened the door and sat in the driver's seat. I closed my eyes and inhaled. It still smelled like her. It smelled like vanilla and old leather and the open road. This car wasn't just a machine, it was a vessel. It held the best parts of my life. I started the engine. It purred a low rumble that vibrated in my spine. I am taking you out, old girl, I whispered. We have places to go. I drove the Impala out of the storage unit and into the city. I drove past the house I used to own. I drove past the jail where my son was sleeping. I drove past the cemetery. I said my goodbyes in silence. I headed south toward the industrial district, toward Russo's Classic Auto. Sal was in the garage working on a '65 Mustang. He was covered in grease, holding a wrench, listening to an opera on an old radio. He looked up when I pulled in. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked over, a grin spreading across his face. She sounds good, Thad Sal said, patting the hood of the Impala. You got the timing right. She sings, I said. Sal looked at me. He looked at the suit I was wearing, the suit of TK legend, and he shook his head. You look like $1 million, Thad. Or 50 million. I gave it away, Sal, I said. Sal stopped wiping his hands. You what? The money, I said. The royalties. The house money. I gave it all away. Started a foundation for old musicians. Sal stared at me for a long moment. Then he laughed. A loud barking laugh that echoed off the steel walls. Of course you did, he said, shaking his head. You crazy old bastard. Bernice would have loved that. She would have. I agreed. So what now? Sal asked. You are homeless and broke by choice. What is the plan? I looked at the Impala. I looked at the open road stretching out on the map in my head. I was thinking about a trip, I said. A trip. Yeah, I said. Do you remember back in '72 we talked about driving Route 66? We talked about seeing the Grand Canyon. We talked about eating barbecue in Memphis and listening to the blues in Chicago. I remember Sal said, his eyes getting distant. We were kids. We didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. Well, I said, leaning against the fender of the car. I have a full tank of gas. I have a pocket full of cash from my pension. And I have the best car ever made. I looked at Sal. And I need a co-pilot, I said. Someone who knows how to fix a carburetor if it acts up in the middle of the desert. Sal looked at his shop. He looked at the piles of parts, the unfinished projects, the grease and the grime. He was 75 years old. He had been working since he was 12. "I can't just leave, Thad," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The shop will be here when we get back," I said. "Or it won't." "Who cares, Sal? We are on the back nine. The clock is ticking. Do you want to die under a Mustang, or do you want to see the sunset over the painted desert?" Sal looked at his hands. They were scarred and stained. He looked at me. "You serious?" he asked. "Dead serious," I said. "I am leaving tomorrow morning. I am going east. I am going to drive until the road runs out." Sal took a deep breath. He looked around the garage one last time. Then he threw the rag into the trash can. "I need to pack a bag," he said. I smiled. "Pick you up at 8, I said. 8 is too late, Sal said, grinning. "Traffic is a bitch." 6. Pick me up at 6. And Thad, yeah, I am picking the music. I am tired of your jazz. We are listening to Dean Martin. "We will see about that," I said. I drove away from the shop feeling a lightness I hadn't felt in decades. I wasn't Thad Moore the victim. I wasn't TK Legend the mogul. I was just a man with a car and a map. I drove to a motel near the highway. A simple place, clean and cheap. I parked the Impala right outside my window so I could see it. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. I thought about Dante. I hoped he was sleeping. I hoped he was dreaming of a better life. I hoped that one day he would understand why I had to burn the bridge to save him from drowning. But I couldn't worry about him anymore. I had done my job. The rest was up to him. I closed my eyes. I saw the road unwinding in front of me, a ribbon of asphalt stretching across the country. Mountains, deserts, rivers, cities. I saw Bernice sitting next to me, her hair blowing in the wind, laughing. "Go," she whispered. "Drive." I slept without dreaming. The next morning at 5:55, I pulled up to Sal's house. He was standing on the curb holding a duffel bag and a cooler. He was wearing a Hawaiian shirt and a straw hat. "You look like a tourist," I said as he climbed in. "I am a tourist," Sal said, slamming the heavy door. "I am touring my own life. Let's go." I put the car in gear. I turned onto the highway. The sun was rising behind us, illuminating the road ahead. The engine hummed a steady, powerful note. We drove east. We drove away from the pain. We drove away from the betrayal. We drove toward the horizon. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. I was just driving. The highway stretched out before me like a gray ribbon unraveling into forever. The 1960 Impala hummed a low, steady note beneath me, a vibration that traveled up through the seat and settled in my bones. I had the top down. The wind whipped through my silver hair, cold and sharp, and it felt like baptism. It washed away the smell of the nursing home. It washed away the scent of Shelby's perfume. It washed away the stale air of the courtroom. Sal Russo sat in the passenger seat, his straw hat pulled low over his eyes, his feet propped up on the dashboard. He was asleep or pretending to be. We had been driving for 6 hours. We had crossed the mountains, leaving the rain of Seattle behind for the dry heat of the eastern plains. We hadn't said much. We didn't need to. There is a language between men who have known each other for 50 years that doesn't require words. It is spoken in silence and in the passing of a thermos of coffee. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They were old hands. The knuckles were swollen with arthritis, the skin spotted like parchment. But they were steady. For the first time in years, they weren't gripping the wheel out of fear. They were guiding the car, not fighting it. I thought about Dante. He was sitting in a cell right now. He was probably looking at a concrete wall, wondering how he went from a penthouse to a prison in less than a week. He was probably blaming me. He was probably telling his cellmate that his father was a monster who tricked him, and maybe I was. Maybe it takes a monster to fight a monster. But as the miles rolled by, I realized something. I didn't feel guilty. I felt a deep, aching sadness, yes. The loss of a son is a wound that never fully heals. It is a phantom limb that itches in the middle of the night. But guilt. No, guilt is for when you do something wrong. I had done the only right thing left to do. I had stopped enabling his suicide. I had taken the needle out of his arm, the needle of greed, the needle of entitlement. If I had let him keep the money, if I had let him sell the car, he would have been dead in 5 years. Maybe not physically, but spiritually. He would have become a hollow shell of a man defined only by what he could buy. Now he had a chance. A slim chance. A hard chance. But a chance. He had to build himself from the ground up. He had to find value in something other than a credit card limit. I looked at the empty road ahead. The sun was high in the sky, a blinding white disk. I thought about Shelby. She was a footnote now. A bad song on the B-side of an album nobody bought. She would fade. She would find another victim, another host to attach herself to, if she ever got out of prison. But she would never touch me again. She would never touch my family again. And Bernice. I reached over and touched the empty space on the bench seat between me and Sal. I could almost feel her there. I could smell her vanilla lotion. I could hear her laughing over the roar of the engine. "You did good, Thad," she would say. "You kept the music playing. The car was more than steel and chrome. It was her. It was us." Every time I shifted gears, I felt her hand on mine. Every time the engine roared, I heard her voice. Dante had tried to sell this. He had tried to sell our love for $15,000. He didn't understand value. He only understood price. That was the tragedy of his generation. They knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. They thought legacy was a bank account. They thought inheritance was a check. They didn't know that legacy is what you leave in the hearts of the people you helped. It is the music you wrote. It is the bridges you built. It is the integrity you kept when everyone else was selling theirs. I had given away $50 million yesterday. I had signed it away with a smile. And I felt richer sitting in this car with a tank of gas and a cooler full of sandwiches than I ever did sitting in that mansion. Sal stirred. He pushed his hat back and looked at me. "You okay, Thad?" he asked. "I am better than okay, Sal," I said. "I am driving." "Where are we going?" Sal asked, looking at the endless horizon. "I don't know," I said. And that is the beautiful part. We passed a sign. Spokane 100 miles. "Maybe we go to Chicago," I said. "Maybe we go to New Orleans. I haven't heard real jazz in a long time." Sal smiled. "New Orleans sounds good. I could eat some gumbo." We drove on. The world was big. It was messy. It was full of people like Shelby and Dante, people who wanted to take what wasn't theirs. But it was also full of people like Sal, people like Kenji, people like the musicians who were going to get their rent paid this month because of the Bernice Moore Foundation. I was 74 years old. My body was slowing down, my eyes were getting dim, but my spirit was roaring like the V8 engine under the hood. I had spent 40 years hiding my talent, hiding my money, hiding my true self to protect my family. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was TK Legend. I was the man who wrote the soundtrack to a generation. And I was the man who had the courage to burn down his own house to save his dignity. I pressed the gas pedal. The car surged forward, eating up the asphalt. I wasn't running away from my past. I was driving toward my finale, and it was going to be a masterpiece. I watched the telephone poles whip by, counting the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It was the beat of a new song, a song about freedom, a song about the open road. I looked in the rearview mirror. The road behind me was empty. There was no one chasing me, no one asking for money, no one waiting for me to die. I was alone. And for the first time in my life, alone didn't mean lonely. It meant sovereign. I was the king of this car. I was the king of this road. I took a deep breath of the dry air. It tasted like dust and sagebrush. It tasted like life. We drove into the sunset, the jade-green Impala gleaming like a jewel against the desert landscape. Two old men in a classic car chasing the last notes of a song that never ends. I spent a lifetime composing melodies in the shadows, letting my family shine in the light I paid for. But when they sold my wife's memory for a plane ticket, the music stopped. I learned that greed makes people deaf to love and blind to value. They saw an old car. I saw a legacy. They saw a senile old man. I saw a CEO. In the end, I didn't just buy back a car, I bought back my dignity. Keep your circle small, your secrets deep, and never let anyone drive your car unless they know the value of the road you traveled. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Would you have forgiven Dante, or did he get what he deserved? Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about justice, revenge, and the hard road to truth. Until next time, keep your eyes on the road and your hands on the wheel.